call this meeting to order, the April 18th, 2022 meeting of the Morris Township Planning Board. Statement of adequate notice. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided to the board by the board in preparation of the 2022 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Moreover, in order to comply with the national and state declarations of the emergency related to COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with the municipal land use law, the Open Public Meetings Act, and the emergency remote meeting protocols for local public bodies, this meeting is being held virtually on a web-based platform with remote public access. Would you please all join me with the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. On the roll call, Sonia?
Mr. Quillen.
Here.
Mr. Nunn.
Here.
Ms. Van Order.
Here.
Mr. Bai.
Here.
Mr. Jorfi.
Here.
Ms. Murphy.
Here.
Ms. Wilson.
Here, and I just want to say Jeannie McKay is attempting to get in and is not succeeding.
Mr. Flowers.
Here.
Ms. Wolf.
Here.
Mr. Slate.
Here.
Mr. Phillips.
Here.
Mr. Fishinger.
Here.
And I, Sonia Santiago, here.
I see Jean.
And I, Edward
She's in.
Bernard, here.
Jeannie McKay.
Here, yes, I'm here.
Okay, Jeannie, thank you.
You made it.
Uh-huh.
And I'm here as well.
Oh, wait. Mr. Benoit.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first item on the agenda is a public hearing, PBO 7-21 and management. Sonia, do you want to read this one?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is PBO 721 and Management LLC for a site plan. Block 8602, lots 4, 5, and 6, 22 Madison Avenue in the B11 zone. This is a continuation from March the 21st public hearing. Applicant proposes to convert the existing bank into a Dunkin' Donut with a curbside service and a market where customers can purchase prepackaged items. Mr. Brady.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to remind you, I'm going to recuse. I am recused on this, so I'm going to drop off.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. And before we proceed, I would like to thank Mr. Bai for his role as acting chair at the last meeting. You look good to me on reviewing the application. So thank you for your time doing that. Mr. Brady?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Again, for the record, David Brady of the firm of Brady and Corial on behalf of the applicant. As Ms. Santiago indicated, we're here on a continuation of an application that we started back in March. At that time, we had basically finished the testimony, other than that, of our traffic engineer. Since then, our traffic engineer has communicated with excuse me, with the board's traffic consultant, rendered an updated report. We also went back and considered some of the suggestions and requests by the board to amend the site plan, and we've done that. I have 3 witnesses tonight. Dwar Patel, who will be short and just address a couple questions in Mr. Fissinger's traffic report. I have Jess Simons, who is with Mr. Ferrero's office. He's going to address some of the changes that we made to the site plan. And then lastly, I have Corey Fisher from Dynamic Traffic to give a testimony regarding the traffic.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed with your first witness.
Okay. I'd call then Mr. Dwar Patel. I do not believe he testified earlier in this case, so I believe he needs to be sworn in.
Thank you. This is the board attorney. I believe he actually did, but I'll swear him in just for good measure. If he could just raise his right hand as well as our board professionals. Do you all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. I do.
Perfect. And Mr. Brady, if you could just give us some background on Mr. Patel's role in the application?
Certainly. Mr. Patel, could you explain to the board your relationship to Anna Management and what your day-to-day function is there and how knowledgeable you are with the operations?
Yes, of course. You can hear me, right, David?
I can hear you.
All right, great. So, yeah, good evening, everybody. Hope everyone had a happy Easter weekend.
Sorry, Mr. Patel, could you please spell your name and give us your address?
Sure. My name is Dwar Patel. DWAR is my first name. Patel, PATEL is my last name. And I reside at 27 South Lane in Warren, New Jersey.
Thank you.
Sure. Yes, so I'm one of the principals of Anna Management. I apologize. I was not at the first hearing. Actually, it was a last minute change on our half. My son got ill, so I had to take care of him for that. He's fine, but I am a second generation Dunkin' Donuts franchisee. I believe my partner Raghav in the first meeting introduced our family, entered into the Dunkin' franchise world in 1989. So we've been in the Dunkin' Donuts franchise world for almost 30 plus years. Our first store being in Morristown, right underneath the Staples Center. Our office is right in Morristown on Moore Street. I grew up in Randolph, very familiar with our area, come to Morristown every single day. I run the operations of our network from the day-to-day to development and all the other things a small business encompasses. So that is kind of my day-to-day. Yeah.
So you're familiar with the proposal that we have before the board here?
Yes.
Okay. In Mr. Fissinger's report, there were two questions I'd like you to address briefly. One related to the curbside pickup. I think the testimony from your partner was that there would be approximately 12 mobile pickups a day. And the question Mr. Fissinger raised is how exactly will that work and how long will each customer be expected to be on site for the mobile pickups?
Yeah, so good question. I briefly, curbside pickup became a thing in Dunkin' actually right when the pandemic hit in March of 2020. Of course, during the height of the pandemic, it was a lot more used. I would say, 10 to 12 curbside pickups is something that is normal, about 1 an hour. Most people do not use it these days, but the people that do, it's about a 2-minute process. They order on their app, hopefully 5 to 10 minutes prior to arriving. Our system tells us that it's a curbside. It tells us what make and model car they have, so it's easy for the crew to deliver the product, and they go on their merry way.
Okay, and in this instance, the plan is to have one of your employees walk out the front of the building and walk over to where the canopy is and deliver items?
Yeah, that's the plan. Take use of the overhang canopy, so it protects them from the elements, and they can quickly deliver the product to them.
Okay. The other question that Mr. Fissinger raised was how will the township be able to differentiate between the coffee shop use and the general retail use? And I don't mean to speak for him exactly, but since he was concerned with traffic, I think the concern there has to do with the different traffic generation patterns of those two uses. So currently, we've got about 2,000 square feet dedicated to the Dunkin' Donuts use, and then just short of 1,700 feet for the expanded convenience items, the prepackaged convenience items. Could you tell the board about
Yeah, sure.
how you plan to use that and whether it's likely or feasible to expand one or the other, or have one or the other slop into the other space?
Yeah, so this came about as everybody knows. The existing building, the old TD Bank, is quite big. It's much larger than a typical Dunkin' Donuts. So there's been times when this has happened where we would go into an expanded use, offering prepackaged items, candy, things like that. It's on the architectural plans. You can almost draw a line. You can see which side is the Dunkin', which side is the the marketplace. So they have their individual register systems, POS systems. It's really just to make economic sense of the space that we have. As far as one replacing the other, I don't see that happening. It's not like tomorrow morning the whole thing will become a convenience store, or a whole thing will become a Dunkin'. It's just to make use of the extra space we have. And we were really thoughtful of, I'm sure at one point or another, if anyone's been inside, it's a very high ceiling, almost a 2-story foyer, and very open. So we wanted to keep it like that. So it's inviting, it's open, it's bright. And that was the thinking behind it.
Okay, so given the needs of a Dunkin' Donuts store, if you could expand at this point, you would have expanded into the whole store to begin with, correct?
Right. And another, I should mention, another thought process was, ever since the pandemic, we noticed less and less people sitting inside, depending on location, of course, but the days of having so much tables and so many chairs are kind of, at least in this industry, are kind of gone for now. If things change in the future, that could change. But so we believe we have plenty of seats and chairs and tables for our use right now. So we had all that space. It's to make return on our investment there.
Okay. And the last question I want to ask you about is, there was some discussion at the last meeting about deliveries and whether or not a tractor trailer would be used at this site. Do you have the ability, frankly, the largest Dunkin' Donut franchisee in New Jersey, to dictate what size trucks come and deliver goods to you?
Yes, we do. We do. So we can mandate to our supplier our once a week delivery to be in a smaller box truck. So it wouldn't be an 18-wheeler.
Okay. So just so we're clear on the record, that deliveries will not be by tractor trailer, they'll be by box truck, and you'll mandate that from your supplier.
Right.
And that's a stipulation?
Okay. That's all the questions, Mr. Chairman, that I have for Mr. Patel.
Mr. Brady, is that a stipulation on the box truck versus the tractor trailer?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions for this witness? I see Mayor Jorford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Patel, for joining us tonight. I have a few follow-up questions since you're speaking about the business end of the proposed venture. You stated, again, reaffirming what was stated at the last hearing about 12 curbside pickups. My question is, do you have any current locations under your purview that repurpose former drive-through lanes for the purpose of curbside pickups?
No, not currently that we repurposed you're asking about the canopy, right? For drive-through pickups? No.
Correct. And do you think that the expectations of potential customers or just the sheer, I guess, traffic plan or on-site traffic plan, the way the proposal set up would facilitate more than the average amount of curbside pickup demand for this proposed location?
I don't believe so. I think, in thinking about other locations where it is pretty easy, I think it's really geared towards people who are unable to get out of their car, or if you have kids in the back. I don't see this going above and beyond the normal.
Okay. And I know, like you said, you have the app to order ahead of time, or whether you're going inside or getting curbside pickup. I would imagine that you have an internal system that tracks that day per day. At the end of the day, when you're going through your inventory, are you able to see how many curbside pickups there are at the end of the day?
Yes. So our system can show us how many what we call mobile on the goes, or so how many people came in to pick it up, how many did curbside.
Is there a reason why an analysis like that was not included with our information for this application? I don't know if that's a question for you or for your attorney.
I can, and then David, you can chime in. Or go ahead, David.
No, there's no reason why it wasn't provided, other than we did not think to provide one. We felt the testimony would be sufficient to establish what the level of service is. It's not a large level of service, as he said, about once an hour. Okay. I appreciate that. I think there is concern about it, and I think it would be beneficial. I would also just want to point out to the board members too, that there are no curbside pickups that are in drive-through lanes, and these are former drive-through lanes. That's a fact. That's what they are. And I think more data, whether or not that's going to drive more curbside pickup, is something that the board should consider. But those are my questions, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Jorthy. Ms. Van Order?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Mr. Patel. Appreciate your testimony tonight. And my questions were along the same line around my concern for this drive-through pickup. I don't have any concern about curbside pickup. I think that's okay. And I do know that it happens at Dunkin' Donuts. I'm a frequent user of Dunkin' Donuts, and I know where they are all around in our area. There are two more, as you know, because you're the owner, one in Madison and one in Chatham, very conveniently located. I have concerns about repurposing this former drive-through. I was driving through it just before the meeting today, and just having a look, like, what would this be like? There's 3 lanes here. My employee would have to cross over, either go behind or in front of cars. To my mind, it would be much safer, and particularly given there's only 1 hour predicted, for them to just park in parking alongside that left side of the building, similar to the parking that you'll have designed and you've shown us on your right side of the building. I also think it'll be a much better look and be much more identified and distinctive as a Dunkin' Donuts and not a repurposed bank if you remove that overhang. And I just would appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the thoughts. I guess this, when we started the application almost through the TCC process almost a year ago, curbside was a lot more prevalent and a lot more used. I can just a store in Madison, for example, very busy store. I think we have about 3 a day. So, I understand there's a lot of concern around the curbside, which I understand, but the thought was we have a canopy, we can use it to protect not only the employees but whoever's picking up curbside. I'm open to changing that location. That if the board feels that it should be in the parking lot instead and not in the canopy.
I feel the canopy should be removed, and it's part of a drive-through for a bank. And that the curbside should be done in the same way it is in the other locations where you have a curbside. That would provide you with more parking, possibly the ability to make a nice, bigger, more expanded island of natural plantings. There's an island to the side of that bank drive-through that could be done to make it more attractive. I'm not trying to redo your plans or anything, but I mean, it would open up some space should this board or the zoning board, make some changes, which I hope it will do, to allow for outdoor dining. I would much rather see, similar to that beautiful, I love the Dunkin' Donuts you have in Chatham, the one on Madison Avenue, and actually also the one down there on the Shunpike. There's a nice little seating area outdoors on both of those. So I would like if the township manages to correct, I think, or amend its requirements for that, I'd much rather see a place for that as opposed to repurposing a bank drive-through. And I'm wondering if you'd be amenable to removing that overhang.
Yeah, I would love to have outdoor seating. I'm with you on that, but as per the current ordinances, it's not allowed. As far as removing the canopy, we made a business decision with this site, keeping the building the way it is, for it to make economic sense, especially without a drive-through use. So once we remove that thought process of having a drive-through, the economics of the site became, our sales would be much lower now. And, it's just being very open and honest. So now doing any other type of building demolition, changing things, I'm sure this would trigger a whole new site plan, changing parking, that's not something I'm prepared to do.
Actually, Ms. Van Order, if the township were to change and allow outside dining, that area that's under the canopy might be actually a perfect spot for outside dining because you'd have protection from the elements.
That our original thought process, Ms. Van Horder, is it was that we could repurpose that outdoor canopy for outdoor dining, or not dining, but having some tables and chairs for people to drink their coffee. That was the original thought process, but that pivoted towards a pickup area. I hope that answered the question.
I'm finished with my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Patel.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the same questions as Mayor Jorfi and Ms. Van Order, and I feel, as Ms. Van Order does, that it would be better to demolish the overhang and to change the configuration so that curbside pickup were actually at curbside with parking against the building. I don't think she said it explicitly like that, but I think it would be better to restripe that part of the parking lot so that people park head into the building, and then the workers that come out wouldn't be faced with what sounds like a dangerous situation of crossing lanes, potential lanes of traffic, of people doing curbside pickup in former drive-through lanes. So I echo her comments, and I feel as she does that it would be better to make that change. I wanted to ask Mr. Patel, I wanted to ask you about the signage. You propose a typical Dunkin' sign that has a color, I guess, a pink type color or orange color and internal illumination. Would you be open to changing the signage to make it more muted and more consistent with the neighborhood? Do you have any stores where that is done?
Yeah, so I thank you for the comments. As far as the signage goes, that is really dictated to us by our corporate franchisor. If there was a particular reason or a particular issue with the signage that we needed to make it look a little different, that's something we'd be open to do. But I think at the current way the signage is, I think it's very in almost just same places where the TD Bank had their illuminated sign. So I think we're pretty comfortable the way it is, but like everything, open to board suggestions.
Okay, and I wanted to know where the nearest Dunkin' Donuts that you operate that has drive-through lanes or a drive-through lane is, because the ones that have been mentioned so far, if I'm not mistaken, they don't have drive-throughs.
Yes, I guess the nearest one would be in Bernard's Township in Basking Ridge on King George Road. The others are in Rockaway Township. Yeah, those are the closest.
When there is a true drive-through, do you experience a significantly heavier volume? I think you mentioned something about when you realized you couldn't do a drive-through, you expected as a result there'd be less volume.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everybody on the board can, even without having much expertise in the industry, especially with the pandemic, people look for convenience, look for less contact, less they pivoted towards drive-throughs. So that is without a doubt. I think Baskin Ridge is a good example where there was our original store didn't have it, and then we had moved to an existing bank just like this. It really became a really popular destination, and of course sales increased, and I think even the local community enjoyed it much better. But yeah, going back to your question, yes, typically drive-through stores are higher sales volume.
Could you share with us an estimate as to what the difference is in sales volume when you go from drive-through to non-drive-through?
Typically, it could be about 20 to 30% more.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. Those are all the questions I have at this time. So thank you very much.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Murphy?
Thank you. I have a question not for Mr. Patel, but for, I think, our professionals. During the last session, there was some discussion about the outdoor seating potentially triggering a variance, and there was going to be some research done into that question. Was that research done? And if so, what did you discover?
So, Ms. Murphy, I'll try and answer that question. So
Who's speaking, please?
It's Paul Phillips.
Thank you.
So this applicant was raised, as you indicated at the last meeting, and we took a look at the definition in the ordinance for what's referred to as a drive-in restaurant. And the drive-in restaurant definition has been in place for a significant amount of time. And it was the drive-through restaurant definition and the prohibition of drive-throughs that was added about 1.5 years ago. And drive-in restaurants remain prohibited, as they have been historically in the ordinance in the B11 district. And as Mr. Brady pointed out, if you read that definition literally, and I'm not sure it was the intent of it because it was before my time, as I indicated, but if you read it literally, I think you would come to the conclusion that it precludes outdoor dining. I'm not sure that was the intent, but I would agree that if there is going to be some provision for outdoor dining, then there's only one of two options which that can be effectuated. One would be through a zone change, and the other would be that the applicant would have to basically make an application to do outdoor dining to the zoning board. So the short answer is yes, and that Mr. Brady's interpretation of the ordinance, I agree, was the correct one.
Okay, so as our ordinance is currently written, this Dunkin' Donuts could not provide outdoor seating without violating our current zoning rules. And in lieu of that, are using the canopy area as a covered place for curbside pickup, as I understand it.
Well, I mean, I think the application speaks for itself, and that I agree with you. That's the representation of what the applicant would like to utilize the area under the canopy for. And there's no prohibition in the B11 district on curbside pickup.
Okay. I'm just going to make a comment now, if I may. I've heard some comments from fellow board members about safety with the employee taking product out for curbside delivery, but with the small number of curbside requirements, it doesn't seem like that's a big safety issue to me. So I'm just adding that to the mix for everyone's thinking. I'm done.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Go back to Mayor Giorfi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Patel again. I did have a follow-up question based on your conversation with the other board members. You mentioned another location of yours that's in a former bank. Was that former bank standalone, or was it part of a strip mall or a larger complex?
Yeah, so a good question. It was a standalone bank building, part of a larger complex. If anyone's familiar with Dewey Meadows in Bernards Township, that's where it is.
Okay. I'm not. So did that location have a drive-through for the bank tellers? And was that retained for your establishment, or was it removed or modified?
Yeah, so it had a drive-through and it was repurposed for the Dunkin' Donut use.
Okay. And was that a similar setup with the canopy, or was it?
Yeah, it has a full three car canopy. So currently we're only using the left side canopy or the driver's side. The other two are just what they call bypass lanes.
Got it. And then you also stated the economic impact it would have on your proposal, the costs of removing the canopy. Would you be willing to share an estimate or a figure of what you think that would cost?
I don't have an exact cost, but I could estimate around 40 to 50,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Van Order?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The mayor just asked one of my follow-up questions. I was unclear about the King George Road Dunkin', whether it had repurposed the former bank drive-through lanes as drive-through for Dunkin'. because when you mentioned that there's 20 to 30% more traffic to the establishment with drive-through lanes, that's not true for these 12 or 10 or 12 people who are picking up. So
No.
just to clarify, my understanding of this King's George Road that we're using as sort of a comparison, although it's not a apples to apples comparison, because the mayor just pointed out how that location is has a different feel and a different surrounding area, being as it's part of a larger development, even though it's standalone. But that particular one there had an existing overhang that you used one lane, which is the lane closest to your establishment for, and I definitely do see Ms. Murphy's point, if it's only 10 or 12 people coming through, how dangerous could that be? I do think people, whether or not you designate them, will use those unused lanes as drive-throughs. They're just going to drive through there. I did it like 5 times when I was there today because I just kept kind of getting turned around, and that's the most logical way to get back to the front. So it may not be a whole lot of people picking up or waiting to get their curbside service, but I think you can anticipate a whole lot of people are going to go through there one way or the other. Some of them in confusion and some of them purposefully. So I appreciate that you sort of minimize the hazard to your employees by just using the one left lane closest to your building there in King George Road. And I'm wondering why you're not thinking of proposing similarly for this, if you do in fact want to maintain that canopy overhang, which, as I said before, I'm not in favor of, but nonetheless, I'm trying to understand it. And I do appreciate the economics that you're sharing. I do. I want you to know that.
No, and I appreciate the question. I hope I'm not confusing everyone. So talking about Basking Ridge, it was a standalone bank that we were within the complex. We moved there. And it actually became a drive-through store. So where you have a menu board, people order and pick up. So we repurposed the window that the tellers would kind of look out, and that became a window where.
But that is a real drive-through.
That's a real drive-through. It's not
okay. So I was very confused about that, and that explains some things to me.
Right.
So do you have any repurposed banks currently used as Dunkin' Donuts repurposed bank space where the canopy of a bank is being used for the purpose of curbside pickup, the former bank canopy?
Yeah, no.
Thank you. That concludes my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Fishinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board members covered a lot of my questions, but it's a few clarifications. As far as the deliveries and the size of the truck, does your earlier testimony apply to any of the packaged goods that would be on more of the convenience store side of the building as well?
Yeah. So on the convenience side, delivery side, none of those deliveries would be in tractor trailers. They would all be in box trucks.
And if this is better handled by another witness, I understand, is there any advertising for the convenience area? How would somebody know that they could get a sandwich or something that they wouldn't be able to get at your other stores?
Yes. So we on purpose, we didn't want any signage, to indicate the marketplace. It's really just a sort of an add-on as people would walk in, and if it's gonna hit you right in the face, that there's this area with the market. It's gonna be like your typical, an open cooler with perhaps some yogurt, some cheese in there. And then I believe there's 3 racks, just some chips, other quick things that, and the idea also was, with Fairleigh Dickinson down the street and Drew, I'm very familiar. I did my MBA at FDU. So just knowing the student body and knowing that whole area, we felt that, it'd be nice to offer a little, people want to come in and get their coffee and then also get, some Red Bull or something like that. But, is there a particular menu? Is that what you're asking?
I was asking more of just signage. Is there something that differentiates so someone would know? Or
Nothing on the exterior.
So you're relying on traffic that would already be coming to the Dunkin' Donuts to then pick up their sandwich or their energy drink or candy bar or whatever, what have you.
Yeah.
And then this may be better handled by your site engineer, but where is there sidewalk from the door your employees would use for the to drop off orders at the old drive-through, or would they be walking out into the drive aisles to connect between the building and the pickup area?
I think Mr. Fissinger will let the engineer, when he comes on, talk about that because he'll have the plans in front of him.
All right, thank you. That's all I have for now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher. I have several questions myself. Mr. Patel, a lot's been said on the Dunkin' Donuts side, but I'm curious about the marketplace side, as you referenced it. I believe the testimony from last time was that those were all going to be frozen items brought to the facility and I guess placed into refrigerators. Is that how it's going to work?
I'm sorry. Could you just repeat that? It kind of broke up on my end.
Oh, I'm sorry. The items from on the marketplace side of the store, are they going to be, at least like the sandwiches and stuff, they're going to be frozen and then brought in by truck and put into refrigerator cases?
Yeah. So on the marketplace side, the refrigerated items. So for example, the prepackaged cheeses and yogurts and things will all be refrigerated. So that will be, placed in our cooler, and then stocked appropriately. The prepackaged sandwiches, smaller subs and things like that, they don't come frozen. They come refrigerated, and they're supposed to be presented and then used within a couple of days.
And then do you sell these items at your other stores too?
No, no. So we have two other stores where we have this kind of expanded offering. So we sell them there, but not at a typical Dunkin'. No.
Okay. I had another question. I think this might be a question for the professionals. There was a lot of discussion last time on, and we've had some discussion this time as well, on curbside pickup versus drive-through versus drive-in. And maybe this is a question for Paul, but has it been decided by our professionals or by you, Paul, that everything they're doing on the site is an approved use, or is there still question as to whether or not the uses or one of the uses is approved under the ordinance?
So, Mr. Chairman, if I understand the question correctly, the applicant is basically in accordance with the TCC's interpretation of the zoning, including the relatively recent zoning amendment, is in compliance. In other words, there's no prohibition on the curbside pickup. And that was not the intent when the ordinance was amended 1.5 years, 2 years ago to preclude the drive-through service. And in fact, when the applicant originally came, I think it was before the TCC on several occasions before it submitted a formal application, they actually had a proposal to provide for a drive-through service. It was indicated to the applicant that there was a recent zoning amendment prohibiting it, and that they would have to proceed to the zoning board if they wanted to pursue a drive-through service. They decided against that. They dropped that from the plan, and now they are seeking only to do a Dunkin' Donuts, which is permitted with the curbside service. So from the TCC's perspective, they are properly before the planning board as a permitted use.
And that goes for the marketplace as well.
Correct. Basically, general retail, which that is permitted in the B11 district.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, just so I can be clear on this, the marketplace is not operated by a separate tenant or anything of that nature. They need 2 point of sale systems for the cash registers because of the relationship with Dunkin' and the reporting to Dunkin', but it's all going to be operated by Anna Management. It's just an expanded level of convenience items that are at the store.
Thank you for that clarification. And then I don't know whether the previous discussion has resolved the issue on the canopy. I just want to be sure that there's, as far as I can tell, there's no stipulation on removal of the canopy or use of the lanes. There are 3 lanes. Is there any discussion, stipulation, preference to use only 1 lane, allow 2 to be for bypasses? I'm not sure that we've really narrowed that down.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, on removal of the canopy, we are not willing to stipulate as expensive. There are other canopies along Madison Avenue, Rod's Ranch House, the Madison Hotel. I think JCP&L has a canopy where people park. Little Learners Academy, which is catty corner to this in the back, has some sort of overhang that people drive through. So there's no particular reason to remove it. It's expensive to remove it. If I think it was per Ms. Murphy, per her indication, that if there's a change in the ordinance, then we can, as part of the change, and I know that the township is looking at the entire Madison Avenue corridor, there's a part of the change that allows outside dining. That'd be a perfect place to have something undercover. So we're not stipulating to remove the canopy because it's expensive, it's there, and depending on what happens in the future, it may be of some value. With regard to how many drive-through lanes, or not drive-through lanes, how many curbside pickup lanes, I'll let Mr. Patel actually address that. It may be that having one closest to the building might be sufficient given the number of people, and it might address some of the board's safety concerns, but I don't want to volunteer that without Mr. Patel weighing in.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so the lane closest to the building would be fine for any curbside pickup. It's easier for the employee to walk outside. It's easier for the customer, I believe. So the other 2 lanes, are just going to be they're not even going to be lanes, in my opinion. It's just space that's there. I think most people will just not even notice that because very few people are going to be doing curbside. Most of them are just, everybody else would just be coming inside, parking on the right side.
Right, but there may be a need to bypass. We talk about some people, drivers may get lost or not be in the right spot and want to bypass.
Sure.
It. Those lanes would be available for that.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I don't know whether that's something that needs to be stipulated.
Yes, would the applicant stipulate to that, to only using the lane closest to the building?
I have no problem with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other, Jim?
No questions.
No questions? Amanda?
Or I'm sorry to interrupt. I just thought of something, and I know this is maybe so stipulating that the curbside would be the closest to the building. I'm looking at a picture of the building right now, and the driver's side being on the left side. It might be it might be a little tight to open the door or get the window down, but I don't know, David, how we can address that, or if the site engineer can kind of weigh in on that. Maybe I'm just overthinking it.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, perhaps we can together with Mr. Slate, figure out a way, because I see Mr. Patel's concern over the configuration was such that when it was banked, you drove up and you were right there next to the building and reaching into that tray that slides out. And that could be tight for someone, I suppose, to deliver curbside. Perhaps we use the middle lane and figure out some way to divert people away from that first lane closest to the building.
That's understood.
Could the stipulation be that only one lane will be used?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Second lane.
Yes.
The second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Amanda, do you have any questions?
I do not.
And Mr. Phillips, do you have any more questions?
Well, if I can, Mr. Chairman, and I certainly heard and understood Mr. Brady's representation about the applicant being unwilling to remove the canopy, but I just want to echo the comments of Ms. Van Order, Mr. Quillen, and Mr. Geoffrey regarding their recommendation to remove the canopy in any of the associated islands. I expressed that opinion at the prior meeting, and I placed my reasons for that on the record. And I would just recommend and ask the applicant to seriously reconsider that request. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. At this point, we can entertain questions from the public. If the public has any questions for the owner, based upon his testimony or comments during this period of time, we'll entertain questions. I see Ms. Collins.
Ms. Collins, if you could just give us your address as well.
Yes, hi, Patricia Collins, 4 Green Knolls Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to address this to Mr. Patel, please. Last week, I asked a question about how many customers would be anticipated, and I was told to wait for the traffic report. But when you were planning this, don't you have any studies or projections of how many customers you're going to have, not counting the drive-throughs? And if not, could you please furnish us with how many they get in Madison? I'm a customer in Madison, by the way, and I know they're pretty busy. Since this is twice the size of Madison, I would think that this would be twice as many customers. But do you have those figures, Mr. Patel?
Ms. Collins, we do have a traffic report and a traffic engineer. He'll testify tonight, and he'll talk about how many trips in and out are anticipated.
Oh, okay.
So I think he's the best
But
one to address that.
I appreciate that, but I was thinking, when Mr. Patel doesn't have that off, like just from a study for projection, does it have to be in the traffic report? Does somebody just know that, Mr. Patel? I mean, I'll wait, of course, but I think it's a pretty legitimate question to say, did you do a study?
Well,
I would think.
David, were you saying something or?
No, I wasn't saying anything. I thought my computer had frozen.
I thought it was frozen too. Okay, if you don't have those figures, Mr. Patel, off the top of your head.
So Ms. Collins, first of all, thank you for being a customer of ours. just to clarify, you're asking how many customers do we get in Madison and then how many we're projecting here?
That is correct.
So, first thing, don't let the size of the building or the business fool you. There's stores that are just the size of, 400 square feet that do really, really well, and some that are monsters and do really, really poorly. So it's not really apples to apples, but just to answer your question, on a daily basis, in Madison, you're looking at about 600 customers or transactions, I should say. And, if we're anticipating about this store to be less busy than that. So you're looking at around maybe 400, but that's not real science for traffic. So, and I don't want to, our traffic study will answer that.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. 400, that's per day?
Yeah, that's so. This is just based on my own science in my mind. So I don't, this is not a study I did or anything, but just based on running the business for about 15 years now, and anticipating where our sales will be compared to, in this particular situation, compared to Madison.
I think, Mr. Patel, just to make it clear, I think you used the word transactions. You didn't necessarily say customers, correct?
Right. So transactions are how many actual checks are coming out of the register. So two people can walk in together and it just be one order. So that's how we kind of look at things on the sales side.
Okay. So next I'm going to call on Judith Benoit. Full disclosure, Judith is my wife. So as long as everyone knows that.
We also have the store and her address.
348 Madison Avenue.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I agree with a lot of what many of you were saying, but I also have some other concerns. And Mr. Patel, you made a very interesting point that I had not thought of. And that was a lot of the college students would be going in and using the convenience store as well as the Dunkin', as well as maybe getting a coffee or a Red Bull or what have you, and going to university, walking there. I live
Mr. Chairman, I hate to cut off your wife, but I have a concern here over your presiding as the chairman of this meeting and being involved in the meeting, at the same time potentially having your wife. I don't know if I would classify her as an objector, but certainly an interested party who's asking questions. And I think I'd like the board attorney's perspective on that, and then maybe I'll respond.
Mr. Brady, this is Amanda. My opinion would be that she does have the right as a member of the public to ask questions. We haven't really seen where her questions are going yet at this point, so she just might have various concerns about the location or what's being sold.
Well, my concern is less, obviously, board members do not lose their rights as members of the public to ask questions, but perhaps the chairman loses his ability to sit on the application and to vote, because there is now, his wife is now taking arguably a position on the application.
I see your point.
I mean, everyone has a spouse who could be commenting on this. And
Mr. Brady, would it be your suggestion that Mr. Benoit recuse himself then?
Frankly, I think he has to. I think it gives at least an appearance of, I hate to use the word impropriety, but I think that's the phrase that's used in all the court cases, because we have someone, not only just a member, the chairman, and the chairman's immediate family member, his wife, taking a position on this. I don't think that conveys the right impression to the public, and certainly our client would have some concern, because I don't know how Mr. Benoit, if his wife is adverse to the application, ignores the position of his wife, frankly. One taken publicly, no doubt, no less.
Well, my wife's position has nothing to do with my position.
And
You don't even know,
Right.
you know, you don't even know the question I'm going to ask. So,
No, I don't. But I want to raise it perhaps before it's even asked, just so we can address this issue.
And for the record, we did have a conversation with Mr. Benoit, and he did assure us that he can decide this case impartially and based on the evidence.
Yes, I certainly
But
can.
And I don't question Mr. Benoit's sincerity in his statement in that regard, but I don't think that's the standard.
okay.
Do we know the standard?
The appearance of impropriety is partially the standard. There's a whole analysis as to direct and indirect monetary or other conflicts, but I don't know this would be a monetary one, obviously, because it's not. Your wife doesn't get anything out of this regardless. I can see how it could be a personal conflict, perhaps, if you both disagree, and then you have to go home and live with each other. But
We disagree on many things in our life, so I'm not concerned about that.
Now, we recognize that, and every board member, has a spouse or has a family, and there may be disagreements. My concern is, though, that it rises to a new level when, as part of the public hearing, a member's spouse is taking a position. And that works both ways, frankly. I mean, Mrs. Benoit indicated we don't know the question yet, and we don't. But I don't know whether Mrs. Benoit's position is favorable to our clients or disfavorable to our client, whether that makes any difference.
And Mr. Brady, what would you suggest that the board does if Mr. Benoit were to decide to recuse? Do you think we should start the proceedings over? Because if there's a conflict, then that would kind of void the entire decision.
Or perhaps my wife doesn't make any comments because she really hasn't made any yet. And then she just uses a member of the public and we don't listen to anything that she has to say. We proceed.
I didn't hear all of that suggestion, Mr. Benoit. You broke up.
If she doesn't make any comments at all, she can continue as a member of the public viewing the meeting. But if she doesn't make any comments at all, then I would just be able to continue. I'm thinking I could continue to act as I've been acting.
Yeah, she can certainly view the meeting. There's no objection to that. And if she hadn't started making a comment, I would never have raised this, obviously. I have to, frankly, if we were in person, I would ask that we take a 5-minute break so I can speak to my client about this. I'm a little reluctant to do that on a meeting with, I don't know, last I looked, it was 34 participants. Looks like now it's 45. But I think I may need to ask for that, Mr. Chairman. So it's ultimately his decision on this issue, and he and I can have a discussion.
So we can take a 5-minute break?
If we could do that, that would be great.
We can do that. All right.
Okay.
Let's take a 5-minute
Thank you.
break. Thank you. Just on the phone. No, no, that's it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Mr. Brady.
Okay, wanted to make sure I was connected back. I've spoken to the client, and since we're already now on the second hearing, our position is so long as Mrs. Benoit does not participate in hearing, I don't mean that she can't watch on the Zoom meeting, as any member of the public can watch. But as long as she does not ask questions or make comments, that we have no objection to moving forward and to you remaining as the chairman for the rest of the matter.
Okay, thank you. So, thank you. Okay, so let's call the meeting back to order on the roll call.
Bear with me. Mr. Quillen,
Here.
Mr. Nunn,
Here.
Ms. Van Water,
Here.
Mr. Bai,
Here.
Mr. Jorfi,
Here.
Ms. Murphy,
Here.
Mr. Flowers,
Here.
Ms. McKay,
Here.
Mr. Benoit,
Here.
Mr. Phillips,
Here.
Mr. Fishinger,
Here.
Mr. Slate,
Here.
Ms. Wolf,
Here.
and I, Sonia Santiago here.
Okay.
We're all back.
Thank you, Mr. Brady and Mr. Patel. So we'll go on to our next member of the public, Lee Goldberg.
Hi, Lee Goldberg, 10 Arrowhead Road, Morris Township.
Yes, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Patel, thank you for bringing forward your application. Just a quick question for you, and perhaps being able to leverage your operational experience and expertise in running all the franchise units successfully. To your own testimony earlier this evening, you seem to almost minimize the extent of the use of the curbside pickup with saying, three pickups in Madison. And then also during these times, people really don't seem to be using it this much. So given that, and then also coupled with Mr. Phillips's information regarding that the initial plan was to have a full drive-through there that was sort of jettisoned and removed from the plan when I guess it was determined that it's not an approved use. Given the concerns of this board and some information that's been shared about those concerns, for such a minimally used sort of feature of the entire enterprise, operationally, if you were just to sort of jettison that or abandon the customer pickup, operationally, I mean, I don't need the financial details of the business, but isn't it de minimis to the sort of overall success of the proposed implementation?
So, thank you, Mr. Goldberg. You're asking, since
Yeah,
the curbside is so minimal, why is
yeah, is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak? Like all this concern about it, where it's located, how it's going to be used, and then for just such, to your point, a feature that it's people really aren't using these days, and there's no sort of demand for it, so to speak. Yeah, it would be a nice to have if the site and everything and it all worked out and everything was fine. But given the amount of sort of concern about it, questions about it, to my point, is the juice worth the squeeze from just a business operations perspective in terms of the overall success of what could be a phenomenal project, and then getting sort of hung up on these sort of issues that aren't really, a big profit center, so to speak.
Yeah, listen, I understand what you're saying. From the beginning, I think the curbside discussion is, while there's very good points, it's perhaps a little overdone. There's like I've been mentioning, very few customers that actually use it. Is it necessary these days? Absolutely. I think the pandemic has proven you can go up and down Madison Ave. You can go to any business. They have a curbside option because there's always going to be customers now that feel more comfortable not coming inside. Now, as far as I guess the follow up, why then keep the canopy and have all this discussion around it. It's to make use of that overhang that exists, and I personally feel the building looks very symmetrical with it, and without it, it perhaps might not look as nice or appealing. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, I mean, thank you for that. My concern isn't really so much with the canopy staying or going. Obviously, I understand there would be a financial cost in remediating that, taking that off the building, which to me, even if there were no curbside pickup, from my viewpoint, the canopy can stay there as well. So I'm not really, I don't have a linkage between that canopy and the curbside pickup. Just the testimony given here and the demand for the actual use of the provided benefit of it just doesn't really seem to be that great that it warrant, if it were just to go away, there would be a lot less perhaps concern with your application and what is being proposed, especially, I mean, I've driven by for example, on Route 10 in East Hanover, the drive through there, on
Mr. Goldberg, I think you're getting into testimony here. I want to just stick with questions.
Sure. So I guess my question is, would it be conceivable for you to consider removing the curbside pickup from the application? Is that something you would consider?
Just to keep it short and sweet, Mr. Goldberg, no, I think it's necessary in businesses these days.
Okay, thank you very much. And then my other question is,
in fact, Mr. Patel, there would be curbside pickup in one way or another on this site, correct?
Right.
Could you clarify that, please? Could you repeat that, please, Mr. Brady? I'm sorry.
Sure. If you look, Mr. Goldberg, if you look at the plans, curbside pickup is also planned along the Madison Avenue frontage. For curbside pickup on the Madison Avenue frontage. That is not covered by the canopy. That was done at the suggestion of someone, I don't remember who it was, during the TCC meeting.
A suggestion from someone from the township?
From the township's perspective, yes.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, some of that got broken up, but thank you.
The fact is we have two places for curbside pickup. Okay, we have two places for curbside pickup, just so it's clear. The first is under the canopy where it's undercover So the person picking up in the vehicle is out of the elements, and partially the delivery to the window of the car is out of the elements. And the other spaces are facing Madison Avenue. If you're looking at the plans, it would be the bottom left-hand side of the parking lot in front of the building, and those are not covered by a canopy. So there's curbside pickup here, whether it be under the canopy or not.
Correct. And from just the testimony earlier this evening by the applicant, usage of that particular feature being offered is very minimal. So thank you that's my understanding of it. My other question is for Mr. Phillips, just so I understand our local ordinance correctly and make sure understanding it correctly. Mr. Phillips, you had said there's no prohibition on curbside pickup in the B11 zone, correct?
You broke up, Mr. Goldberg. Can you repeat the question?
Earlier, you had mentioned that there is no prohibition on curbside pickup in the B11 zone, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, but there is a prohibition on the drive-through. And within that definition, when we amended the ordinance 17 months ago to further define it, it defines the drive-through as, delivery of food or serving it through a window, so to speak, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so from my perspective, it really seems like we're splitting hairs on this. So if the ordinance had said there was a prohibition on curbside pickup, then there would need to be a variance, and that would go to the zoning board. Is that correct?
If there was a prohibition on curbside service, they would have to go to the zoning board, but there is no prohibition on curbside service.
And the curbside service, as it's been explained here, technically, it's not, the food or the merchandise is still being delivered through a window, but in this case, it's just, an individual coming outside and handing it to someone through a window versus a fixed window attached to a building.
Actually, no, Mr. Goldberg. As I understand it, the curbside delivery is not through a window. It's through an employee leaving the store through a door and basically delivering the order to the customers parked in their vehicle, whether it's under the canopy or in one of the designated spaces.
That car has a window and the employee is literally handing it through a window into the car, correct?
No, the definition has to do with basically the window of the building where the customers serve through. This is completely different and doesn't meet that definition.
Doesn't meet that definition. Thank you very much for clarifying that.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ms. Burke?
Hi, thank you. Megan Burke, 8 Shepherd Place. Question for Mr. Patel. In crafting your site plan and your design for this space, what efforts did you put into kind of crafting safer pedestrian access, whether to the proposed Dunkin' Donuts, to the site in general? I asked that question with consideration for the apartments that are located right across the street from you, and also your close proximity to a number of residential neighborhoods. And may I say, by way of example, will you have bike racks installed at the site? What other things you're going to do to try and minimize traffic to the best that you can, considering that at some point that will not be possible.
Ms. Burke, many of those questions really were more appropriate for Mr. Ferrero when he was here as the engineer, as he designed the site. If a bike rack is a specific request, Mr. Patel can answer that, obviously, but it's an existing building. So, the infrastructure around it, such as sidewalks and the like, already exists.
Well, I think that as neighbors, that it's fair for us to ask the question of a new neighbor coming to our neighborhood of what his concerns are for the people that walk and bike in this area on a regular basis. And as a business owner, what efforts has he made and what discussions has he had with his engineer and architect to maximize whatever is already existing and make it as pedestrian friendly as possible to try and minimize additional traffic to our neighborhood?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Burke, for the question. I'll echo what David said. A lot of the questions the site engineer can answer or is answered, but let me start from the beginning. When we enter any project or any situation, the safety of customers, employees, pedestrians, delivery vendors, that is the foremost, top priority in everything that we do, and not only required, by law, but I guess your question about the sidewalks coming from and going to, the site, a lot of those it's existing. If you're talking about the sidewalks that are near the property or on the property, anything that is not up to code will be fixed. But anything, if you're asking from across the street or anything like that, I don't think I'm the one who can answer that. But going back to your question about bike racks, I have no problem having them. I just would have to work with our engineer in the town, to see where would be the most appropriate location. I travel Madison Avenue frequently. I do see some people walking up and down, not a lot of bikers going up and down where this particular property is. But you being a neighbor and living locally, of course, know more than me on what would be nice feature to have. So I'm definitely open to having some bike racks, and if that's something we can look at, absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You, as you get more familiar with the area, there's a road behind the premises called Old Turnpike, and that is a very frequent bike route for children and adults, which would probably be used as a destination to your establishment. And so if you could keep that in mind, I would very much appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public with questions for this witness? Diane Holland?
Good evening. 26 Northbridge Place. I apologize for missing the first meeting, and so if my comments have already been or questions have already been answered, I apologize. I do want to make a clarification that the Primrose Child Care Center tore down the pass-through lanes within the last 2 weeks. So they are gone. I also thought I heard Mr. Patel say, we don't want this to be a popular destination. And I'd like some clarification on that. Did any?
Hi, Ms. Holland. Yes, I don't recall saying that we don't want this to be a popular destination. Of course, we would love for this to be a very viable, successful business. I guess I was referring to other locations and trying to give a perspective on what we foresee the sales. Sometimes our science is good. Sometimes it's spot on, and sometimes it could be different, right? But absolutely, we want this to be popular within the town, within Morris Township. We are very active in all the towns that we operate in. We get involved with our chamber, with our little leagues. Here, in the city of Morristown, I was actually awarded the key to the city during a lot of the hurricanes, and anytime there's any events in the town, we support our firemen, our policemen. We do that in many towns that we operate in. So we want to be very, very popular. So I don't want to, if I misspoke before, I apologize, but absolutely, we want to be very popular in the town.
Thank you. Anything else I have will come during comments.
Thank you, Ms. Holland. Any other members of the public with questions? Seeing none. Oh, Ms. Burke?
Sorry, I just thought of one more question. Mr. Patel, you do not have any plans, do you, to advertise this location via signage on 24?
On Route
24 East or, yeah, on 24 West, considering the proximity to this location to the highway, I just would like to confirm if you have any plans to advertise it there.
You're talking about the blue signs on the highway?
I am. There's a few there that direct people to Florham
Yeah.
Park at the moment.
Yeah, not at the current moment.
Okay, well, I would ask the board to consider if that would be appropriate for a stipulation in the approval.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, I would think that would be particularly inappropriate. It does not deal with land use. It deals with our client's rights to market its goods and services. Not at this site either.
I would concur with Mr. Brady.
Okay. Any other members of the public? Seeing none, Mr. Brady, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next witness is Jess Simons. And Mr. Simons, if you would raise your right hand and Ms. Wolf can administer the oath.
Or you would raise your hand. Don't see you yet. Can't see your hand. Can you just move it over a little bit? There you go. Thank you. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And Mr. Brady can qualify you.
Okay. Mr. Simons, for the record, would you state your name and spell your last name and provide the board with an address?
Jess Simons, SYMONDS, and our business address is 180 Main Street, Chester, New Jersey.
Okay, and Ms. Simons, could you review for the board first your educational background and then your vocational background since graduating?
I received my degree in civil engineer in 1985. Received my professional engineering license in 1987. Prior to coming to work for Ferraro Engineering 4 years ago, I owned my own firm for 30 years. I've testified before boards in Hunterdon, Warren, Somerset, and Union County. I testified before the Morristown Planning Board about 8 months ago. I sit with the Scotch Plains Planning Board and Liberty Township, Warren County Planning Board and Board of Adjustment.
And your engineering license is in good standing at the moment?
Yes, it is.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that the board accept Mr. Simons as an expert in the field of civil engineering.
No objection.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Simons, we had originally gone through at the last hearing with Mr. Ferrero, the civil engineering plans on this. Tonight, I wanted to address some changes to the plans because we have some updated plans that have an update date of March 30th, 2022. If you could tell the board what the changes are. I have 4 of them written here, but if you'll go through them, I'll check them off and then we'll cover each one.
Yes. We've revised the width of the parking spaces on the south side of the site to 10 feet. We've also added a enclosed dumpster location in the eastern side of that and provided buffering 15 trees, actually evergreens. Again, we've revised the parking spaces to the southwest of the site, which is along 124, and again to 10 feet. We have added make-ready spaces or electric vehicle charging spaces on the south side of the building. We've had 2 of those spaces.
The one thing that's not noted on the plan is that we actually get a credit of 2 spaces for adding those 2 spaces. So we have added or removed the existing lights along the rear of the site and going to refit them with lights that are on 14-foot poles. They're LED, they're very directional. They're 3000 Kelvin, which is a yellowish light rather than the whiter or blue lights or the higher degree lights. And we have added curbside pickup signs and no idling signs below the curb pickup.
If we can, why don't we then talk in a little more detail? I see that on sheet 2 of the plans, it calls out that the existing lights, 2 of the existing lights along the rear property line will be removed and replaced. Those current lights are kind of a globe fixture, are they not?
Yes.
Okay, the replacement lights, I take it are shown on the construction details on sheet 4?
That's correct. It's a flat structure. They're LED, which are directional lights, so they shine downward rather than spreading out so much. And
Mr.
it
Brady,
is.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Would it be helpful to members of the public and board if we could just share those plans so everyone can see?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Mr. Simons, can you use the screen sharing function to share those plans?
I'll try.
And just for the record, these plans are submitted more than 10 days in advance of this hearing, correct?
They were submitted, I think, either late last week or early this, not this week, because today's Monday. So sometime last week.
Okay, so we'll mark this as exhibit A3.
Right.
And it will be a compendium of all 4 sheets.
I'm sorry, did that make 10 days?
Okay.
Did that make 10 days?
No.
Okay, so A3 then will be sheets 1 through 4. They're the Ferrero preliminary and final site plan with revision date of March 30th, 2022. And why don't we go, Mr. Simmons, to, if you can, sheet 2 of 4, so you can point out to the public where the lights are being changed.
Okay, the lights are being changed to the rear of the building, if you can see my arrow. And there's 2 of them back there now. Here and there.
Okay. And then maybe if you can go to sheet 4 of 4, which has the details, so you can discuss the details on that light.
Yes, this is a detail of the light pole, and this is the fixture. On top, again, it's a flat fixture. It's downcast. It's not the globe type like out there now. This shines directly down. Again, LED are directional lights. So.
Okay. Now, if we can go back to sheet 3 of 4, that depicts the refuse area. Could you point that out to the board?
This is the refuse area right here. And this is the adjoining lots refuge area. So we're close to that.
And is there going to be landscaping added around the refuse container or refuse enclosure?
There's 15 trees proposed around the outside here.
Now, you indicated there were 2 electrical vehicle charging stations added. Where is that located?
They are right here. And the charger is a double charger. So it's a one charging unit services 2 spaces.
I believe you also indicated you added some no idling signs. Could you point out where those are?
There's one no idling sign right here, which the people, if they come up here for the mobile pickup, can see. And again, below the signs in the front, the pickup signs, there's a no idling sign below that.
Okay. The chart on that page indicates with regard to parking that 9 parking spaces are required and that we are proposing 24 spaces. So we're compliant with that, but it also indicates at the bottom that we need a variance for 3 stalls that are 9 feet by 20 feet, where 10 by 20 feet are required. Could you point out to the board where those narrower stalls are located?
Those are the stalls right here. They're basically existing, the existing stripes are 9 feet and they've been left that way. These are the 2 handicap spots. That's 8, 8, and 8, which is a conforming van accessible. And again, the two of those spaces will be for the electric vehicle parking. And that's generally, you don't pull in there and pull right back out again. It takes 20, 30 minutes, depending on the battery size of the vehicle to charge, sometimes longer.
If you can go to page 4, there are details with regard to the refuse enclosure. Could you go over those with the board, please?
That's right here. There's room in there for a refuge and a recycling dumpster, and it's enclosed with a solid board fence, a steel frame.
I have no further questions from Mr. Simons.
Okay. Board members, any questions? Mr. Quillen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure whether my questions are appropriate, more appropriate for this witness or the next one, but I'll try with this witness. Mr. Simons, would you be the right person to ask questions of about circulation within the site for people driving around in their cars, coming in one entrance, going out another, navigating their way around through the site?
I could help you with that, yes, probably.
I'm just wondering how this works. I've driven the site and I've been confused about the layout. In the rear, which I guess is the, what is that, the eastern side?
Yes.
That roadway will, or that driveway will be one way, is that right, going north?
I believe that's the intent, yes.
And then once a person gets toward the end of the building or near the former drive-through lanes, the person will have to decide whether to drive into one of those former drive-through lanes or drive around the far side of the island. If they drive around the far side of the island, then they have to either exit or come around the island.
Yeah, come around and come across the front of the building. That's correct.
And if they come around the island, is that still one way where that bulbous part of the island is?
No, that would be 2-way in that area. It would only be one way across the back.
Oh, okay. And if a person wanted to turn, I'm having a little trouble expressing my directions because I think of Madison Avenue as going east-west, but it kind of goes north-south here. But I'll call it west. If a person wanted to exit the property and head toward Morristown, which is kind of northwest, would it be better to go to the side road, to the Langdon Lane exit, or would it be better to go to the exit that's directly on Madison Avenue?
That's probably a better question answered by the traffic engineer. The site allows you to do either, but they could probably predict better which way the people will go rather than me.
Me, and this may be related to comments that Mr. Phillips mentioned, that he that he has put on the record already. To me, that island on the left-hand side of this diagram, just beyond the former drive-through lanes, that island seems confusing, unnecessary, and in the way, and I don't really understand its purpose other than it's there, and maybe the applicant doesn't feel like demolishing it. And so can you explain any kind of purpose for that island?
No, only to separate anyone coming through this lane from someone coming around the corner. It gives you a little bit of distance and sight distance before they get there.
Yeah.
It basically funnels anyone coming through these things to come out in this area rather than closer to the cars coming down the side.
Fewer lanes there, the former drive-through lanes.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can now. Yes, thank you.
Okay. If there were fewer of those former drive-through lanes and the island were not there, then it seems like it might be possible to even put some parking spaces over there and allow people to still get through. But I understand this involves some construction costs.
I mean, we could put some bike racks under the canopy there. That would block them off and address the other residents' question about whether we're going to put bike racks there or not.
What about the island on the other side of the building, that more rectangular looking island? What purposes does that serve?
We didn't design the original site. It's there now, and we didn't disturb it. So there is the underground detention area is right under here. So.
Okay, I think those are all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Fishinger?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick questions. Just one little housekeeping issue. It looks like, and I apologize, I don't remember specifically when I was out there, that there used to be some signs on the island out to Madison Avenue. Will those signs be replaced as part of the project? I don't see anything on the site plan.
At this point, we're not proposing any signs on the island, no.
Okay, are you aware of what used to be there? There's, to the best of my knowledge, that from the photo, Google Maps photo I'm looking at, there is very clearly a hole that used to have a sign on it. Are you aware of what sign used to be?
No, I'm not. Sorry.
Right. And then the bigger question that was alluded to earlier, can you walk us through if you're an employee's doing curbside pickup, how would they walk from the building to the curbside pickup area and back? And is there sidewalks for that? Are they walking in the drive aisles? How does that occur?
There's two options. They can come out the front door, and they would walk out on the pavement and around to the car that's parked under the canopy. There's also a rear door here. It only has this, the required, it's either 3-foot or 4-foot stoop, concrete stoop out there. It would be possible to construct, 6 to 8 feet of sidewalk to connect that. If that's the board's wish.
Well, I guess my question is, what is the applicant proposing?
He's proposing what's on the plan now.
So that would be to use the front entrance and walk through the drive aisle.
That's correct.
And then also there was alluded to earlier, how wide are what's now the drive-through lanes, and is there adequate space for somebody to walk to deliver something to the driver's side window? I think there was some concerns, particularly up against the building.
Up against the building is tight. Once you get out on the island, yes, they could stand on they could get alongside the car to deliver them.
And I believe there's what would have been the vacuum tubes for the bank use in that drive-through area. Will they be removed as part of the project, or would they stay?
I think you'd have to ask the applicant that.
I believe the actual equipment or the metal boxes will all be removed. If that's what you're asking. Mr.
Yes,
Fisher.
that was my question with the what looks like aluminum boxes that held the mechanics for the, I assume they're vacuum tubes to get into.
There's no
bag.
reason, Mr. Fissinger, for them to be there. They may be in the way of delivering food. I think Mr. Patel is correct that they're going to come out.
Those are all the questions I have for this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bai.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, and more of the housekeeping nature. On the first page of the revised site plan, up on the general notes, I think you have number 24, says existing striping on site to remain. Well, you've just said that you're going to change some of that striping, so.
Yes, that should be revised. The existing, only those existing striping in the area south of the building. Any of the others will be, the striping will be removed and be repainted.
Yeah, as shown on the plans. Okay, yeah, I thought that was just, probably you just missed it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Van Order?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question for Mr. Simon. Again, going back under the canopy area, I'm just looking at a picture that I took today. So I understand Mr. Fissinger's question about removing these metal, what's used for transacting things that have to do with the bank, which obviously you don't need. Just trying to clarify if these little islands, that create the separation between the three aisles, that each of them have two black bollards. Will they remain there with their, with that curbing and the two black bollards? Will that stay in place?
I would say yes. Unless the applicant contradicts me something.
Yeah, we having them staying.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Slade?
Yeah, Mr. Simons, couple of questions. The two proposed lights, the lighting spread plan shows that there's spillage over the property line. Is it possible to install shields on the backside of those lights to eliminate the spillage?
Yeah, we could install house side shields, yes.
Will the applicant stipulate the same?
Yes, we will.
Thank you.
On the plantings proposed around the dumpster, I noticed they're called out as American arborvitae. I think the deer tend to like them. I would recommend we go to I believe it's known as a dark green pyramid arborvitae. That deer tend to not eat them. I mean, this.
I know they don't eat
everywhere.
They don't eat the giant green arborvitae either.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're planting something that's not going to.
Well, I don't know about these. I know what the one you're speaking of, and they don't eat the giant green. Those two they don't eat definitely. So we could put either of those two there to make sure.
You know what? Why don't the applicant would be willing to stipulate to coordinate with Mr. Slate as to an alternative plant species to protect that, because we all know what the deer do to arborvitae.
So another question related to those plantings around the dumpster. On what I'm going to say is the north side of that enclosure, there's only 3 or 4 trees. Is it possible to extend that so it runs, that buffering extends, further up to more the front? And then is it also possible, as a follow-up, to incorporate some landscaping on the south side of it? I realize that may take some modification to a parking spot. You may lose a parking spot, but typically you would have those plantings buffering 3 sides of the enclosure.
What I think we could do is, it looks like we're 4 feet off the curb. Maybe we could move the dumpster space 4 feet down, tight against where the existing curb is, and leave that 4-foot area in the front of it to add some plantings, and then add your additional to the rear.
I think that then if we leave that 4-foot setback seemed to meet the rear yard setback requirement to avoid a variance. So I guess is the applicant willing to, modify the plan to show plantings around 3 sides of the dumpster?
I believe we are, Mr. Slate. Mr. Patel, can you confirm that?
Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Okay, so we'll remove the 1 parking space and plant that area.
Sure, if that's what's necessary. And my last question kind of stems from the canopy pickup spot. Is it, your opinion, or is it possible to extend the sidewalk from the front of the building along the side of the building to provide a sidewalk that essentially would enable the delivery person to walk out of the front of the building and walk on a sidewalk to deliver the package to the whoever orders and does the drive-up order?
Again, I'll defer to the applicant, see if he wants it. We'd have to add some curbing and some sidewalk across the front, and some curbing and sidewalk down along the building.
I think that helps delineate the pathway, and it eliminates that first lane, which really doesn't serve a purpose because you can't really squeeze between the building and the car, based upon the bank configuration of cars as close as possible to the building. So if we're using that second lane and there's curb and sidewalk there, I think it just kind of cleans that up.
So Jim, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, just so I'm clear, then that would extend the sidewalk along the front of the building, kind of just around the corner into the canopy where customers will park for the curbside pickup.
That's correct.
Okay. I'm looking at a rendering that we had submitted. I'm not sure that might change some of the landscaping in front of the building, because right now the sidewalk doesn't go through there, and it looks like there's a little outcrop of landscaping. But with that being said, Mr. Patel, do you have an objection to that?
No, I do not. If I'm understanding exactly what you're saying, so I see, there's some sidewalk that goes maybe about 5 feet away from the end of the curb. So you're saying to extend that sidewalk out, so there's sidewalk going around. I don't see a problem with that.
Maybe we could put the bike racks in the first aisle, in the first bay there. That way it would give anybody on a bike access to the front of the building also.
Yeah, Jess, I don't have a problem with that either, if that's a good spot for it and it's safe for the bikers, or anywhere on the site for the bike racks. But yeah, I see what you're saying, Mr. Slater, with the sidewalk.
I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask one question?
Yes.
Piggybacking on Mr. Slate's questions, do you think it would be helpful to have a crosswalk leading from the entrance to the curbside pickup spaces along Madison Avenue?
I think I'd leave that to the traffic engineer. I don't really know how much traffic we're going to be going across the front of the building. So, and generally when you put a crosswalk across, it usually goes across to a sidewalk somewhere. So.
I think it's probably a good safety feature.
We can add it if that's your wish.
Thank you. Mr. Simon, I have a question for you. I apologize for not being at the last meeting to ask you at that time, but you placed a dumpster in there. We really appreciate that. I'm curious about the site trash containers for people who are leaving the building or sitting in their car or do their takeout and need to dispose of their trash in containers. I don't see any around the site unless I'm missing them. So I'm wondering if there's been a study or some sort of plan for how individual person's trash will be handled.
I don't think the engineer would normally put an indication for like movable trash containers, but I'm sure Mr. Patel can address that since he operates, multiple Dunkin' Donuts facilities.
Okay, that'd be great.
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's really site specific on if it's needed or not. Quite honestly, we try not to have so many. It gives the site a cleaner look, in my opinion, and then people tend to be a little messy around them, and just try to stuff in things that don't fit, things like that. But with that being said, we listen to our customers, and if that becomes something that they would like to see, we would normally put one right near the entrance, right near the front door, on the sidewalk. But like Mr. Brady said, it's a movable unit. Some stores don't have any, and some we have them. So if that kind of answered your question, normally, if a customer has, let's say, the previous day coffee, they kind of tend to walk in with that old cup. They throw it away inside because, of course, inside we'll have some trash cans, and they can proceed to getting their coffee. But that I guess that's why it's not really shown. So we'll make a decision based on kind of the needs of the customers at that time.
I'm a little concerned about trash ending up around the site and off the site, and windy days, and if people are going to throw their trash out the window or walk out and throw their sandwich wrapper down and go off with their sandwich, I'm afraid just want to know if you have a plan for making sure that the site stays trash free every day, or that there's enough facilities or receptacles around for people to throw their trash away and for it to be emptied every day as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's within the operations of the Dunkin'. Site cleanliness, site safety. It's built into our operations. Every 30 minutes or so, they're supposed to come outside, take a look at all the trash. Before we open, and once we're getting ready to close, they do a sweep through the parking lot. We have once a week maintenance company that comes out. They maintain our landscaping, the leaves, they blow the parking lot. So if anything that's not caught, or something gets caught up on one of the bushes or something, that's normally handled at that time. But like I said, if it becomes an issue that the customers at this particular location are have a lot of trash to garbage, and we need to put a trash can near the entrance or on the side, then we will do that.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it sounds like it could be a neighborhood issue as well. If the neighbors find Dunkin' trash around for whatever reason, then.
Yeah, I personally, that's a big no-no in our operation. Is it foolproof? Of course not. There's things that can happen in retail. That always is the case, but we want to maintain a clean, precise operating building, parking lot, and that includes making sure that there's not just cups lying around or things like that. And anything that's not caught by our employees. That's why we have a maintenance company that we employ once a week. In the spring and summer, and then more in the winter. It's you can't blow in the winter, but still maintaining that cleanliness is there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Phillips, did you have any questions?
No questions of this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Did I miss anybody? Any members of the public witness is the engineer, talked about those 4 items. Any questions? I see Ms. Collins.
Yes, Pat Collins, 4 Green Knolls Road. I don't have a question. I just have a request for the board that the last meeting, we ran out of time and the public did not have time for comments. And I know myself and some other people, we had comments. And I have a feeling we won't be able to do it tonight either. Would you keep in mind when the time comes that we get sufficient time to air our comments? Thank you so much.
Yes, Ms. Collins, we will certainly give the public their due time for making comments. We can never anticipate the length of time these meetings will take. Tonight, we're going to need to stop testimony around 10 o'clock so the board can consider other business if it's on. Maybe a little later if we're in the middle of something. But I can assure you that we will allow time at the end of all testimony and other questions for the public to ask to make their comments. So we look forward to that period of time for that purpose. So Mr. Goldberg.
Yes, Lee Goldberg, 10 Arrowhead Road. I just have a procedural question maybe for Mr. Brady or for our board attorney. I think at the beginning of this section of testimony, I heard some reference to 10-day notice of receiving of reports or something along those lines. You know, I'm just confused. The township website, and maybe there's a disconnect, has 3 letters: the revised traffic impact study, the traffic review letter, and then also the revised site plans. All of that have a receive date of 4/12, which is just only 6 days ago. So I just wanted to tie that all out and make sure that we're in compliance in terms of when things were received or distributed. Or am I reading this incorrectly or understanding it incorrectly?
No, Mr. Goldberg, you're not understanding it incorrectly. Normally, if something is submitted more than 10 days in advance of the hearing, we don't have to mark it as an exhibit because it's already part of the public record. But in this case, as you point out, it was submitted pretty recently, so we're making sure that it's an exhibit, so it's clearly part of the record.
Okay, very good. Thank you for just clarifying that. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the public with questions for this witness? Seeing none, Mr. Brady, would you like to call your next witness?
Yes, my next witness is Corey Chase from Dynamic Traffic. And Corey, if you raise your right hand, Ms. Wolf can swear you in.
I don't see you yet. Oh, there you are. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Mr. Brady will qualify you.
Okay, Mr. Chase, for the record, would you state your name, spell your last name, and provide us with an address?
Certainly, it's Corey, C-O-R-E-Y. Last name is Chase, C-H-A-S-E. Principal with the firm Dynamic Traffic, located at 245 Main Street in Chester, New Jersey. Licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. Bachelor's of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of Massachusetts. My license is currently in good standing. Been qualified as an expert in traffic engineering before over 100 municipalities throughout the state, including Morris Township on a prior occasion.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that the board accept Mr. Chase as an expert in traffic engineering.
No objections.
Thank you. Mr. Chase, if you would, could you tell the board, you had submitted a traffic impact study to the board and it was updated with a revision date of April 6, 2022. Could you tell the board what you did to prepare and then to revise and update that report?
Certainly, and Mr. Brady was correct. We did prepare a traffic impact study. It was originally dated March 17, it was originally dated March 17 of 2022. It was last revised April 6, 2022. The revisions were in response to the comments received by our office that were issued by Mr. Fishinger's office. The original comment letter was dated March 21st, 2022. So having the advantage of receiving Mr. Fishinger's comments in advance of the last hearing, we had the ability to revise the traffic impact study and address some of the comments contained in his review letter.
Can you tell the board what you did in terms of your study then of this site and the proposed use?
Certainly. And I'm just going to share my screen just to start by walking the board. I know that there were some recent discussions on the site access and circulation, so I thought it may be helpful. Well, it's still fresh in everyone's mind to just touch on those topics. So I'm going to pull up the site plan prepared by Mr. Ferrero's office and share that with the board just to talk through site access and circulation. Can you see my screen, Mr. Brady?
Yes.
Great. So I have before you this evening, the site plan that was prepared by Ferrero Engineering. It's the site plan sheet, and just for my own benefit, I'm going to refer to Route 124 as east-west. I know it was mentioned by one of the board members, being that it's designated as an east-west roadway, traffic engineers typically stick with that designation. So I'm going to be referring to Route 124 as east-west, and Langdon Lane would be considered in a north-south direction. So as Mr. Ferrero previously provided testimony at the last hearing, the site's formerly occupied by a TD Bank with drive-through. It does have two existing curb cuts. One's located along Route 124 westbound. The other access is located along Langdon Lane. The existing access to the subject property along Route 124 is currently restricted as a right-in, right-out only driveway. There is a channelizing island in the middle of that driveway to restrict those turn movements. And I believe Mr. Fishinger was correct when he mentioned earlier, there used to be a sign within that island. My guess would be that it had a no left turn sign in there. It's been since knocked down and has not since been replaced, but there is evidence in that island that there was previously a lane use designation sign indicating and reinforcing that left turn egress restriction. So anybody that's traveling east along Route 124 to access the subject property can turn left onto Langdon Lane, travel north, and then turn right into the subject property. Similarly, if you wanted to make a left turn movement out of the subject property and travel east along Route 124, you again would utilize that Langdon Lane access, which the Langdon Lane access is signed as left turn only, meaning that no right turns are encouraged to be made out of this driveway. So anybody wishing to travel east on Route 124 would execute a left turn movement along Langdon Lane and then another left turn movement to travel east on Route 124. The circulation aisle on the northern side of the building is one way in a westbound direction only. There are do not enter signs as well as stop signs on the northern island approach, which is proximate to the former drive-through for the TD Bank. This is to indicate for any vehicles entering the site from Langdon Lane that this is in fact a one-way drive aisle in a westbound only direction, reinforcing the fact that as they enter the site from Langdon Lane, they're required to make a right turn to travel south to traverse towards the front of the building. The remaining drive aisles around the site are all two-directional in nature. There are stop bars, stop lines, and stop signs indicating the right-of-way. Obviously, vehicles entering the site from Route 124 have the right-of-way as they enter the subject property. The east-west drive aisles along the southern building facade are required to stop, yielding the right-of-way to those vehicles entering the subject property. Our primary role in the application was, again, to prepare a traffic impact study to assess the pre- and post-development impacts of the redevelopment of the subject property. We did prepare, at Mr. Fishinger's request, a trip generation comparison to compare the traffic generated by the redevelopment of the subject property with a Dunkin' Donuts without drive-through, as well as some convenience items located within the facility to the former drive-in bank use. That's summarized on table 5, which is located on page 7 of our report. You can see we compared trip generation projections based on data published by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, utilizing the 11th edition of the trip generation manual, which is the current edition of the trip generation manual. We utilized, again, the drive-in bank use, as well as the ITE categorizes this use as a coffee donut shop without drive-through use. We also, I know that it's ancillary to the proposed coffee donut shop, but given that the convenience-oriented nature of the offerings within the store may increase the weekday evening peak hour trip generation projections, whereas obviously a coffee donut shop use tends to have primarily a morning traffic generation concentration. We broke out the area approximately within the store to account for some additional potential weekday evening peak hour traffic generation by separating those two uses from a calculation standpoint. You can see within the table, it's important to note that not all trips oriented to and from this redeveloped facility are going to be new, meaning new additional traffic on the adjacent roadway network. Dunkin' Donuts, in its very nature, is a convenience-oriented use, and patrons are typically already along the adjacent roadway network. The Institute of Transportation Engineers actually publishes what they term a pass-by percentage, meaning that vehicles utilizing this facility are already vehicles that are on the adjacent roadway network, either on their way to or from work, or to or from home, or to and from one of the variety of commercial uses along the Route 124 corridor, and would take advantage of this facility upon redevelopment. So those trips will enter the subject property from their origin, and then when exiting the subject property will continue to their original destination. And this is purely a stop along their way to their original trip. The IT has identified approximately 60% of the traffic during the peak periods oriented to facilities similar to this are pass by in nature, meaning that those vehicles are already on the adjacent roadway network. So that reduces the amount of new vehicular trips on the adjacent roadway network. So you can see in table 5, which again is located on page 7 of our report, we do provide a breakdown between the new or primary trips and the pass-by trips for both the former bank use as well as the proposed redevelopment of the subject property. The end result is the redevelopment of the subject property with consideration of both the Dunkin' Donuts without drive-through and the convenience-oriented offerings within the store would result in a maximum trip generation increase of 87 additional vehicles on the adjacent roadway network during the weekday morning peak hour. That equates to approximately 1 to 2 vehicles per minute during the peak period. We did perform a level of service analysis at the adjacent intersection of Langdon Lane and Route 124. And we also performed a vehicle gap study to assess the availability of the gaps in traffic, which are created by the adjacent signalized intersection located to the east of the subject property at Kane Road, as well as the adjacent signalized intersection, which is not shown on the plan, located approximately 1,400 feet to the west at Dermody Road. Normandy Parkway. I apologize. Those two signals being located to the east and the west of the subject property create platoons in traffic, meaning that when the traffic is red along the Route 124 corridor, it creates additional gaps in traffic that may not be recognized by the level of service analysis, as it assumes a random arrival rate and that traffic is arriving in an unimpeded flow and not impacted by the traffic signals to the east and west of the subject property. When we analyze intersections that are located similarly to Langdon Lane, we often perform vehicular gap studies to determine the actual gaps in the amount of the existing two-way traffic on Route 124 to determine if there are sufficient gaps to process the additional vehicles that would be generated by the existing traffic along Langdon Lane, as well as the supplemental traffic which would be generated by the redevelopment of the subject property. The gap study results are summarized on tables 7 through 8 and 9, which are located on page 10 of our report. And the conclusion is that there are sufficient gaps in the vehicle traffic along the Route 124 corridor to accommodate the additional demand and traffic which would be generated by this development. Based on that, based on, again, the limited increase, again, in the peak hour trip generation as a result of the redevelopment of the subject property, we feel that the proposed Dunkin' Donuts without drive-through and convenience offerings within the facility can be accommodated on site, and safe and efficient access will continue to be provided to the subject property. As you, Mr. Patel mentioned, deliveries to the site will be limited to single unit trucks only. Speaking from prior experience in developing TD and former commerce banks, those sites were all designed to accommodate single unit trucks, often armored cars. UPS and FedEx vehicles were delivering to those facilities. So they were already designed to accommodate a single unit truck. Bless you.
Thank you.
And given that the design vehicle for the proposed development will be the same, I can confirm in my professional opinion that it'll continue to provide safe and efficient access for those delivery vehicles. As Mr. Patel noted, deliveries will occur on site. They will occur adjacent to the northern building facade. So even though the site will not be open and the truck would have free reign of the entire parking area to maneuver, it can be accommodated within the existing drive aisles. Loading activities can occur towards the rear of the building without having any negative impacts on site access or circulation. As was discussed earlier, the pickup operations are going to be concentrated to the existing drive-through canopy, which is located along the western building facade. As Mr. Simmons mentioned, we will be modifying the site plan to add additional sidewalk to provide a direct pedestrian connection from the existing sidewalk. As you can see my cursor moving in an east-west direction on the southern building facade. The sidewalk, as you did note, does terminate just beyond the southwest corner of the building. So this would be modified to extend the existing sidewalk and then provide a dedicated pedestrian pathway to those drive-in lanes. I believe a question was raised earlier as to the width of those drive-in lanes. They're approximately 10 feet in width, and the islands are approximately 3 to 4 feet in width. So there is sufficient width to provide, again, a dedicated pedestrian path. There is sufficient width in those existing aisles for an employee of the store to stand and deliver the curbside pickup goods to the patron. Mr. Brady, that was all I had for direct testimony. I believe that I touched on all of the items that Mr. Fishinger raised in his more recent April 12, 2022 review letter, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has, any questions that Mr. Fishinger has, or anything you think I may have missed in my direct testimony.
The only thing I noted, Mr. Chase, was I know that you talked about the increase in trip generation for the morning. I don't think you talked about what happens in the evening compared to the bank use.
Oh, certainly.
Unless I missed it.
No, you're correct, Mr. Brady. My apologies. I left that out. When you compare the new trips to the former bank use in the weekday evening peak hour, it would actually be a reduction in trip generation when compared to the bank use. So the bank use previously generated 70 new trips during the weekday evening peak hour, and the redeveloped coffee donut shop without drive-through would generate 55 new trips during the peak hour. So comparable trip generation, but slightly lower than the former use.
Okay. I don't have any further questions of Mr. Chase.
Mr. Brady, can we just mark this as exhibit A5, I believe we're up to?
I thought, Amanda, it was A4, but it might be A5. I thought A3 were the revised site plan drawings. And that would make this A4, I believe.
I believe you are correct.
A4.
Just for clarification purposes, these were previously submitted to the board. I apologize. I don't have the more current version showing the dumpster location in the northeast corner, but these were the original site plan drawings that were last revised. I believe it was October 27, 2021 that were previously submitted. For purposes of my testimony, obviously impacting the site access and circulation, no changes were made so that they still accurately reflect my testimony.
And can circulation be accomplished efficiently and safely with that design?
It can, yes.
Board members, any questions for this witness? I see Mr. Fishinger's hand up.
I'll let the board members go first, Mr. Chairman, unless you want me to ask my questions first.
No, I see other board members' hands, so we'll go with them first. Mr. Flowers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chase, I'm concerned about a situation where, let's say a customer is traveling, I believe you say east on Madison Avenue coming from Morristown, and they're going to turn into this property, not on Langdon Lane, but directly into the property. And then they go left to go in front of the building there. Yeah, thank you for moving the cursor. That's exactly what I mean. So if they go left right there, and then let's say all of these parking spaces are taken, and they couldn't really see that as they're making that left turn in there. Or maybe they think there's one open and now it's not. Once you get to that point, once you've made that left in front of that building, what are your options right there? How do you get a parking place in Dunkin' Donuts at that point?
Sure, and that's a good question, Mr. Flowers. And unfortunately, you're correct. So if a vehicle is traveling east along Route 124, believe it or not, the left turn movement into this driveway is actually restricted. I know that the sign, as Mr. Fishinger correctly pointed out, has been since knocked down. So a patron should not be making this direct left turn into the site. Let's assume that was to occur, and then they were to make that immediate left turn and travel back in a westerly direction along the southern building facade. They do have a clear line of sight as you're traveling east along Route 124. There is a clear line of sight to see if those parking spaces are occupied or are vacant. But assuming that they make that left, that they mistake themselves and they think that there is a space and there's not. Correct. Unfortunately, once you pass this point in the subject property, you're going to have to go out to Langdon Lane and then recirculate to enter the property again to access another parking stall on the western, or my apologies, on the eastern side of the building.
Okay. And I for some reason I didn't pick up on this before, but they're not supposed to be turning left into the property directly anyways.
That's correct. There is a channelizing island out there, and there used to be a sign on that island that indicated that no left turns were to be made into or out of the subject property. I know that those signs were at some point knocked down and have not been reinstalled, but the way the driveway was originally permitted with the NJDOT was to prohibit both the left turn in because it's along the full width of a left turn lane, and NJDOT does not allow direct driveway access, a direct left turn driveway access along the full width of a left turn lane, nor do they want left turn egress movements to occur as well.
So all customers coming to the property traveling east on Madison Avenue are going to be required to turn left onto Langdon Lane, then make the right turn in there. And so, that changes things dramatically. Okay. All right, I'll leave it to the board professionals and other board members, but that's it for me for right now. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Bai?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chase, a question on the gap analysis, which does seem to leave plenty of room there, except for left turn lanes from either Exxon or Langdon Lane. That seems to be the tightest ones. My question was, I know you accounted for the traffic for the Primrose School on Langdon Lane. Did you account for any additional traffic on the other exits? They have a new exit. They have new entrance exit or something right directly off of Madison Avenue that wasn't there before and isn't been in operation when you were counting gaps. And then also for the next building down, I think that wasn't in operation when you did the gap counts. Wouldn't those have some gap filling potential too, and reduce the number of gaps at the Langdon Lane Exxon exit intersection? Exxon. Yes,
It would, and that's a good question as well. We did, and I apologize for not mentioning this in my direct testimony, but as Mr. Fishinger suggested, as part of his review letter, we did obtain the traffic impact studies for both 200 Madison Avenue and 355 Madison Avenue. So we did incorporate those into our analysis, into the background traffic volumes used in our analysis as well. So you are correct. They're not reflected currently in the existing conditions, but we did have the benefit of obtaining those traffic impact studies and then including them as part of our analysis.
Well, I know you did for the Langdon Lane, there because you added there, but were they part of the gap analysis? Because all I saw was you added the traffic for the Primrose School to the Langdon Lane traffic. I saw that in terms of total trips and new trips. But were they counted in that gap analysis and the needs at all, or did you just count? You see what I mean? Is that
no, I do understand.
You've talked about gaps because of the controlled intersections at either end, and then you counted those gaps as they're now, and then you looked at what your traffic projects are going to be for those for Langdon Lane and the Exxon station. But did you account for there will be some traffic from Primrose Lane coming out, not on Langdon Lane, that will be filling those gaps?
Sure. And again, the assumption is that one vehicle exiting the driveway from the Primrose School could utilize the same gap as someone exiting Langdon Lane or the Exxon driveway. There is a small chance that those vehicles could utilize one of those existing gaps in traffic. However, the intent is with the platooning of vehicles in the east-west direction and the separation between Langdon Lane and that driveway, that those vehicles could utilize the same available gap.
Okay, so you don't think that those vehicles filling those gaps would dramatically affect the surplus of gaps that you seem to have found in your gap analysis? Or
That's correct. It wouldn't have a significant impact on the results of the analysis.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chase.
Is that in order?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Mr. Chase, I just wanted a quick follow-up question regarding Mr. Flowers' comment and your, thank you for clarifying. I had heard that you said the left-hand lane the left-hand turn restrictions would be in place. Now I understand that to be something related to the New Jersey DOT, not just common sense and safety, which I'm sure that's what that's based on. Is that this at this point, will the requirements around signage and no left-hand turn be something that's kind of outside our purview and more as to what the applicant and we have to do because of what NJDOT requires? Or is this something that needs to be needs to be clarified in part of the plan around, signage, so people are not tempted, to sneak that left-hand turn, as, people will try to do to save time.
Certainly, and that's a good question. We can certainly update the plan to reflect those signs that should be in place or should have been in place as part of that prior access approval for the driveway, as I noted, and Mr. Fishinger noted as well. There's clearly a sign that was in the island that was knocked down at some point, and that sign would typically say no left turn. Typically, NJDOT will also install a reinforcing sign facing the eastbound direction of traffic that says no left turn into the driveway. They'll put a clarifying plaque on there. Obviously, we don't want to confuse the drivers by putting a no left turn sign that's along an eastbound no left turn lane. It may cause a little bit of driver confusion. So there is some additional signage we can do at the driveway. We can work with Mr. Ferrero's office to make sure the plans are updated to reflect the location and the intent of those signs so that it's clear for the board how those restrictions will be enforced and how they'll be perceived by the motoring public.
Mr. Chairman, you frequently ask if we'll stipulate to that, and we will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chase and Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Quillen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had a couple of questions. One is about the islands that are within the property. The island on the western side near the former drive-through lanes, that teardrop shaped thing or hockey stick. My imagination doesn't allow me to come up with a good name for that. But anyway, that island there that you're indicating, what would you say, Mr. Chase, is the value of having that island there?
The value is to provide a separation between the curbside pickup area and the two-way traffic. And it also helps reinforce the fact that the lane on the northern side of the building is one way in a westbound direction. It reduces this opening, which reduces the likelihood that someone would come in the Langdon Avenue driveway and try to go the wrong way in an eastbound direction when the drive aisle is supposed to be westbound direction only. So it's really to, as vehicles enter the site from Langdon Lane, to enforce their route of travel, which is to turn right and then make another right, travel south towards the front of the building before traveling east-west parallel to Route 124. And I would anticipate that your next question will be the island on the eastern side of the building, the landscaped island.
No, not yet. I have more questions about the one on the west.
My apologies.
So that's fine. So the purpose of narrowing the drive lane that's one way up toward the northern end that could be accomplished, I suppose, by a smaller structure of some sort that was only maybe 1/5 or 1/6 the length of that straight segment. Seems like that would be possible.
It would certainly be possible. Again, I think the intent also was to provide, landscaping and screening of the drive-through area from the public on Langdon Lane. And again, to provide a physical separation between traffic entering the facility to be able to clearly delineate their route of travel.
Seems like one of the things that that island does is for people who come through the pickup lanes, it encourages them to turn left because of the curve of that thicker part of the island down there.
And that's a good question as well. So the teardrop or the curve portion of this island is really so that when it was operating as a drive-through bank, what we tried to do as part of the design layout of these facilities is not have 4 vehicles side by side exiting, the 3 drive-through lanes, and there's also a bypass lane. What we tried to do was to neck this down to a point where you weren't going to have 3 or 4 vehicles side by side waiting to all pull out at once. So the idea was to have the vehicles merge in the drive-through area before they entered into the circulation areas on the site. And that'll be further helped by the fact that, we're modifying the sidewalk on the southwest corner of the building and providing that crosswalk that'll further reduce this opening to reinforce that.
It'd be difficult, though, for a person to turn right coming out of that region, right? Would you want to allow that? Would you prefer that they turn left?
I'm sorry, Mr. Klein, you cut out a little bit for the first part of your question. Could you just repeat that?
It would be difficult for a person coming through those pickup lanes to turn right and head for Langdon Lane. Isn't that correct?
So the intent, as I understand it through prior testimony, was that we'll likely be utilizing not the lane directly adjacent to the building, but rather the lane 1 to the west. So that would provide a sufficient alignment for a vehicle to do curbside pickup, traverse in a southerly direction. They're required to stop, yield to traffic that's on that 2-way aisle, which is going in an east-west direction along the southern building facade. And there is sufficient geometry there to allow a vehicle to make a right-hand turn and to head towards Langdon Lane.
Okay. The structure there allows really 3 drive-through lanes, right? Even with the one next to the building having been blocked off, there are still 3 that remain. So how about the other 2?
So the intent again would be that, if these 2 lanes are utilized for curbside pickup, the vehicles would merge and form, a singular queue before exiting the curbside pickup area and reorienting themselves around the site through the circulation aisles. I think the intent is to maintain the bypass lane along the westernmost, what was the former drive-in area. So that would continue to be a bypass lane. But again, by the channelizing nature of the island, the intent would be to have those vehicles merge before executing their turning maneuvers back into that east-west drive aisle on the southern building facade.
The radius of that circle that a car would have to make is wide enough that you think any car could easily do that?
There is sufficient opening here so that a vehicle could orient itself to make that right-hand turn and continue back towards Langdon Lane.
All right, so if you could now talk about the purpose of the other island, that would be great.
Sure, and my understanding is it's primarily a function of providing landscaping within the parking lot, and that was really the intent, was to break up the existing asphalt, provide a curbed landscaped island area that would separate and not provide double loaded parking areas. So you have 2 single loaded 2-way aisles. So you have the aisle along the eastern building facade, and then you have the eastern parking aisle rather, which fronts the property line. So this allows these parking maneuvers to occur without having to worry about another vehicle backing up on an opposite sided. If these rows were to be double loaded, you would have vehicles backing out from both the east and west sides of the drive aisle into a singular drive aisle. with the provision of that landscaped island, it also provides the added benefit of having landscaping, but it allows these vehicles to execute their backing maneuvers without having to worry about a vehicle backing up from opposite the drive aisle.
Thank you. Then I wanted to ask about whether there was an analysis that you were involved with having to do with Old Turnpike Road. Seems to me that there was some discussion about possible changes to Old Turnpike Road as part of this application. Is that true? And were you involved?
Mr. Fishinger asked the question about potentially converting Old Turnpike Road to two-way for its entire length. Right now, it's my understanding Old Turnpike Road is two-way up to the Cozy Cupboard. And then once you go west of the Cozy Cupboard, it's one way in a westbound direction until it hits Langdon Lane. So there is a stretch, several hundred feet long, where Old Turnpike Road is just one way in a westbound direction. Based on my review of Old Turnpike Road in that area, as well as the 90-degree bend where Old Turnpike Road intersects Langdon Lane, there isn't sufficient width of that road currently to provide two-way access in its entirety. I'd certainly be open to discussing that with Mr. Fishinger and interested to hear his thoughts on that as well.
Thank you. Yes, I think the road is two ways for a certain small distance from Con Road westward, but maybe not quite as far as you said, but generally what you said about the setup on that road is correct. And I'd be interested in what Mr. Fishinger has to say as well. So I think that's it for me for now, and I thank you very much for your time. And thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, I do have questions myself, but you want to respond to that first, or should I go first?
It's up to you, Mr. Chairman. We can talk, since we're on that subject, we can discuss it now. I believe the issue with changes to Old Turnpike Road came up at one of the earlier TCC meetings. It was in one of the early review TCC memos. And I think the project has undergone some changes since those original memos. Mr. Chase is correct that right now the road is not wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic along its length. In absence of providing that widening, and I realize that this applicant doesn't control the property necessary to widen, I wanted to ask Mr. Chase if he had looked at the possibility of switching the direction of Old Turnpike Road so that it, instead of being, we'll say, westbound as it is now, if it would make more sense to go the other way and eastbound, which would ultimately give this site and some of the other ones access to Con Road and therefore left turn access at the signal, as opposed to forcing all of the left turns out to Langdon Lane. Corey, did you look at that at all?
It could certainly, Joe, be accommodated quite easily. There's just, based on my review, there was just a singular one-way sign along Old Turnpike Road. The volumes that we observed on Langdon Lane were heavy in the right turn direction. And to me, your recommendation would certainly make a lot of sense because it would also eliminate the potential for vehicles coming down Con, heading southbound towards the signal at 124, who may make the quick right on Old Turnpike and then use Langdon Lane as sort of a cut through if they're going to continue west on Route 124. That would eliminate that movement from occurring. So you are correct. If that short direction, again, between, I believe it's the Cozy Cupboard driveway and its intersection with Langdon Lane, if that section of Old Turnpike Road was to be reversed, that would allow vehicles to utilize the traffic signal at Con Road to make left turns to travel east on Route 124.
And Corey, I know this is an existing condition that probably predates both of our involvement with any of this. Did you consider any changes to the left turn only coming out onto Langdon Lane? Reversing Old Turnpike Road would require changing that turn restriction as well, because right now nobody can make a Nobody's supposed to make a right turn out of the site onto Langen.
That's correct, and I would agree with you in that assessment, and that if it was to be reversed, that it would not make sense to keep that left turn only restriction at the Langdon Lane driveway. The intent would be to allow vehicles to turn left and right out of that driveway if that was to be reversed.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you have any other questions specific to that issue, or if you want to ask the rest of your questions now.
Yeah, I don't have anything specific to that issue. I'm curious, Mr. Chase, about the assumptions used in the study or the basis for the traffic counts. It looks like you've relied on the Institute of Transportation Engineers for trip generation. I'm assuming that's some national institute, and I don't know how they get the numbers, but it's one thing to use that, I think, as a comparison, but did you have any local data that you were able to use for that?
No, sir, we did not study any local Dunkin' Donuts facilities to generate the trip generation projections. Mr. Fishinger would agree with me. It's typical for all traffic studies in our realm to be prepared utilizing the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. NJDOT recommends it, requires it rather, for all of the studies that we prepare under their review. We utilize that as essentially the Bible for our traffic reports as we develop them. So,
and what is that manual, Mr. Chase? How is that compiled and based on what information?
Sure, it contains a variety of land use categories, from commercial, residential, retail, office. They have a land use category for a wide variety of uses, and they're all based on research counts, which are conducted throughout the country by various transportation professionals. All that data is then submitted to the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They review it and compile it, and then these projections are developed based on those research counts.
And your testimony is that is relied upon in the field of traffic engineering by traffic engineers throughout the country to make trip projections?
That's correct, because unfortunately, when we go towards the idea of utilizing local data, then Mr. Fishinger and myself have to agree on what a representative site would be. And we may not always agree on the metrics which would categorize a site as being representative to the one that's proposed. So this takes that debate out of the scenario and allows us to utilize a national and state agreed upon methodology to come up with these volumes.
Okay, thank you. I just want to quote one sentence in your study so we can chat about that. It says, it should be noted, I think this is page 4. It should be noted that the analyses within the highway capacity manual assume a random arrival for all the movements, which may not be the case an adjacent traffic signal is present that platoons vehicles, such as the signalized intersection of Madison Avenue and Conn Road. And then we also have, that's the end of the quote. I mean, you mentioned Normandy Parkway, but we also have Normandy Parkway, and I would add Canfield and Punch Bowl. I know that there is a lot of backed up traffic along this route. So I'm wondering whether this assumption of a random arrival, maybe I'm not sure what that means, but there seems to be a lot of slow moving traffic because of the lights that might affect the ability of people coming out to make the left-hand turn or being stuck for longer periods of time at lights because of this traffic. So I just wanted to ask you about that statement and whether that statement affects the results inordinately because of all the other signalized areas, because of the other two signalized areas along this route.
Sure, and I'd be happy to clarify that. So you are correct. So what that quote is meant to mean is that when we do the analysis of the intersection of Langdon Lane with Route 124, it assumes a random arrival rate, meaning that it's assuming that vehicles arriving there unimpeded not being impeded by traffic signals on either side of it. What those traffic signals do, and which was really the reason why we did the gap study, because when there are signals present along either side of an unsignalized intersection, what we tend to see is the platooning of vehicles, so that you have vehicles stopped in the east-west direction on Route 124 while the north-south roads go. What that does is it creates longer gaps in traffic, which you wouldn't see if this road was, if there weren't signals for within several miles of the site. You would see vehicles arriving on more of a steady stream, more of a random arrival rate, and they wouldn't be in groups of traffic once they're released from those signals. So when we have that occur, that's really why we do the gap studies, because we go out there and we actually videotape the gaps in traffic to see how the platooning of the existing flows impacts the operations of Langdon Lane. And then we're able to do an analysis to determine what the available gaps in traffic are and how much traffic could be accommodated.
So if I understand,
Mr. Chairman, in fact, I asked Mr. Chase the same question this afternoon when I spoke to him. And I take it, Mr. Chase, that your program kind of would assume something like you'd see maybe on Route 80 or Route 24 on the highway, where cars kind of travel kind of randomly and fill in gaps and spread out. But that, in fact, in this particular location, that assumption gives the wrong information. And it's the gap study that at this particular location gives the more proper and accurate answer.
It is, and yeah, that's correct. Really, the analysis assumes, again, as I mentioned, that traffic is arriving at more of a steady rate than is the actual case when the presence of signals impacts how they arrive to and from the adjacent intersections.
so if I understand you correctly, it's actually better if there's a lot of traffic that's moving really slowly because there's a lot of traffic out there for you to merge, and you can say that the study says the gap is more favorable to enter because there's a lot more traffic and it's going slower.
I would characterize it, sir, as saying it's better if there are traffic signals present on either side of the intersection, because that controls how the traffic gets to and from this intersection on either side. So what it does is it creates large gaps in traffic that wouldn't be there if those signals weren't there, because if those signals weren't there, you could just continue straight on 124 unimpeded. You wouldn't have to slow down for the signal. You wouldn't have to stop and wait for the light to turn green. Cars would just keep going in a two-way direction. What those signals do is they actually hold the traffic back on either side. And what that does is it allows all those vehicles on Langdon Lane to go while it's being held back. And then when they go, there's less gaps in traffic, then the light will turn red again and create more gaps in traffic.
Okay, so it seems to me what you said, and along those lines, if the traffic going east is backed up at Con to the point where it goes past Langdon Lane, and I don't know how often that occurs, then a car coming out Langdon Lane wouldn't be able to turn left, and possibly the cars coming out of Exxon wouldn't be able to turn left. I don't know if it happens now. One of the things that you said in your study is that if it does happen, correct me if I'm wrong, you can always just park on the striped area and merge as the cars allow you to do that. Is that right?
That is correct. There is the existing gore area, which separates the westbound and eastbound directions of Route 124. So there is the potential, yes, if you did not find a sufficient gap in eastbound traffic, you could pull out, use this area as they refer to as a refuge area, and then you could merge back into Route 124 eastbound traffic. Like Mr. Fishinger's suggestion of reversing Old Turnpike Road from the westbound direction to the eastbound direction would provide another relief if that were to occur. You would be able to turn right out and then go to the signal at Con Road and make that left, or even continues in a southerly direction.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. And even if you turned, even if we changed the highway, the one way on Old Turnpike, it could come left out of the property and then turn left on the Langdon, and then right onto Madison Avenue, more or less unimpeded. It would kind of allow you to turn both ways out of the property onto Langdon.
Correct.
Um, So it's permissible to turn left and park yourself onto those stripes? I didn't know that was legal.
It's not illegal to cross a hatched area.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I had. Yeah, that's all the questions I had. Any other board members, follow-ups? Mr. Fishing, your hand's still raised.
He has more questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To just close the door with the gap analysis. Basically, when we typically use the highway capacity software, we run that analysis, and assuming random arrivals is usually the more conservative option, that if we don't take into account the signals and we get decent levels of service, then we usually stop there. That the signals usually in this case will create more gaps or longer, or consolidate the gaps rather, to where more cars can turn out. In this case, because we were seeing the traditional analysis was giving us 4 levels of service, that's why Mr. Chase did the gap analysis. That's why you don't see a gap analysis on every single study, because it's an additional expense that isn't always necessary. As far as making that left turn in 2 stages, Mr. Chase's report did identify that. Given the width of that door area, I didn't want to take credit for that because I don't know that there's really enough width. That was why another reason why the gap study ended up being done was once we had the analysis, and I wasn't comfortable relying on using that median as a way to make a left turn, hence doing the gap analysis to see if the signals were generating enough gaps or not. With that being said, Corey, I did have a couple other questions for you.
Sure.
Have you made an application to DOT yet? Where does that process stand? Do you have any comments back from the state?
We have not made that application yet, Joe. Any action on the board would have to be conditioned on the applicant obtaining the necessary approvals from DOT.
But do you anticipate any major changes to circulation from your experience with dealing with the state, or will it likely come back the way as it is now?
I don't, I would expect that we would just be effectively re-permitting the driveway volumes on the access permit. We're not proposing any driveway changes. The turn movements, as I noted on 124, are already restricted. So, the site was designed to accommodate the TD Bank and could certainly accommodate what we're proposing on site today. So I don't expect any geometric changes to the driveways. I expect us to just go through the paperwork process of updating the permit as would be required with DOT.
And along talking about that pork chop island on 124, if memory serves, that island is cracked already. There's some maintenance issues. Would you be repairing that as part of the project?
Mr. Brady,
I think, Mr. Fishinger, that we had stipulated that we would reinstall the no left turn sign, because obviously it seems to make sense as a matter of safety. I don't know if that means that the entire island gets replaced or a portion, but if we're there working and it looks like the island requires something, we certainly would replace it. Do you have a particular concern about it?
If I believe the concrete is cracked, like at one point a truck drove over it and cracked the concrete because it wasn't designed to handle heavy trucks. I think it's more of a maintenance issue than anything else.
Okay.
And then 2 remaining questions. Corey, you may not have the answer to this one, but I know there's been a number of changes with regard to parking stall widths and number of spaces. Do you have an updated total as to how many spaces, parking spaces are proposed on the site after all the revisions have been made?
There were 24 spaces proposed as part of the current plan, but I know that there were some discussions tonight about potentially eliminating one more space, so that would take us down to 23.
And then the last question, in your traffic study, when you did your distribution, you assumed pretty much everyone traveling westbound into the site would use the right in, right out driveway. You didn't route any traffic westbound into the site via Langdon Lane. Can you briefly explain your reasoning for that? Why are you assuming everyone will come in that first driveway?
Certainly, just based on the orientation of the site, the location of the primary parking field, and the ease of access to the front door, again, it was our assumption that everyone would utilize the existing right in, right out driveway if they were traveling in a westbound direction on Route 124. You may find a very small sampling of customers that miss the existing driveway and would then utilize Langdon Lane. But again, in my professional opinion, I would contend that the majority of those customers would utilize that driveway to access the main parking area in front of the site.
And do you think that would change if some of those vehicles use Langdon Lane instead? Would that change the results of your analysis?
I do not. I believe it would be such a small percentage that it wouldn't have any perceptible impact on the results of the analysis.
Those are all my questions, Mr. Chairman. As you know, Mr. Chase revised his report after getting my initial comment letter and addressed a lot of my technical issues at that time by doing new counts and adding the developments that were in the proximity that weren't in the first round of the study.
Okay, thank you. And I do have one question. I'm not sure whether it's Mr. Fisher for you or Mr. Chase, but was the vehicle, I'm not sure how to say it, vehicle use per road capacity part of this study? Do we know what that is as a result of this project?
Yeah, I'll take that, Joe, unless you want to handle it. We did do a level of service analysis at the driveways to analyze, and I believe, Mr. Chairman, that's what you're referring to, what the actual capacity would be of those driveways.
I'm sorry, no, actually Route 124.
Oh, I apologize. We did not do a two-way capacity analysis to determine what the existing utilization factor is. You're talking about in a two-way direction on 124?
Yes.
We did not do that, sir.
Okay. Is it something, Mr. Fisher, that we should be looking at in the near future, or something that pertains to these projects? We know that we're getting busy.
Typically, that's not something that a project like this would be responsible for, because a project of this size wouldn't justify a major roadway widening, even if the state would permit it. Given that 124 is a state highway, that would ultimately fall under state jurisdiction regardless.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all I have. It's 5 past 10. Any other board professionals? Paul, do you have any questions?
I have no questions of this witness, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Okay, so why don't we break for the day, and then next time we'll allow all of our public commentary.
Mr. Chairman, we haven't done the public questioning of Mr. Chase, and I'd like to suggest we do that tonight and have that out of the way. I can understand why you might want to separate the public comment from the public questioning, but I think it might be, while it's fresh and while we're here, we can just finish out the questions.
You're right. I apologize.
I think that's that.
I jumped ahead of myself. I apologize for that. So, yes, we can do that. So why don't we open up this witness for comments from the public?
Public questions.
Questions from the public. It's getting late. Okay, Ms. Collins?
Yes, Patricia Collins, 4 Green Knolls Road. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chase, thank you for taking my questions. But I'd just like to preface it with something. I've lived here right around the corner from Friendly's from 24 for over 40 years. So no one is more familiar with the traffic patterns than people in our neighborhood. And making a left-hand turn, I used to go to the bank where you're building that, and making a left-hand turn.
Mr. Chairman, now we're getting into testimony. If we could limit it to
Yes,
questions.
I intend to ask about 4 questions, but I just wanted to say this because I wanted to see if things were taken into consideration. Traffic is backed up, but to 287, people going to 287 from Madison, it's hard to get out. Now, I would like to ask Mr. Chase, did you factor in the pandemic? Because only approximately 50%, and I could be wrong, of people are back at work. So what happens when people are fully back to work and you're going to increase that traffic dramatically because it's always increased? Number 2, did you factor in the daycare traffic?
Ms. Collins, if we can we take one question at a time?
Oh, sure, certainly. Okay, did you factor in the pandemic that only 50% of the workforce is back?
So that's a good question, Ms. Collins. We compared our counts that we did in March to historical data published by the New Jersey Department of Transportation. And the counts we did in March were actually higher than the historical DOT data for this road. So based on those comparisons, traffic along Madison Avenue is certainly back to what it was pre-pandemic. And based on our counts, it actually exceeds where it was pre-pandemic.
Okay, thank you. All right, did you factor in that the daycare that's going in too? That's because the hours are approximately the same. It's early morning, and that's when people get their coffee, and that's when people drop their kids off. Did you factor in that? And one more building too, there's a medical building on Old Glen and 24, and it was an office building, and now they even got more spots that was just presented to the board. They got more spots for parking because it's a medical building in and out. So were those 2 things factored in?
So Ms. Collins, we did, Mr. Fishinger pointed that out as well, that we should include the traffic that was going to be generated by the daycare. So we were able to obtain that traffic study and incorporate that into our analysis. I apologize, I'm not aware of the second development that you're referencing.
Okay. And then when you mentioned 87, an increase of 87 riders per day on 24 based on your analysis, and yet if there's approximately 400 people going in there in the morning, how can you come up with 87? Could you just tell me how that you came up with that again, please?
Sure. I'm not aware of where the 400 number that you're referencing came from, but the 87 number that I spoke of, we took the ITE, the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation projections for the former TD Bank. And then we took those same projections for the redeveloped subject property. And then we compared the 2 data points for the weekday morning peak hour. So
I was just going to say, isn't that comparing apples and oranges, a bank to a Dunkin' Donuts, where there's a very high volume, and I know that because I go to the one in Madison. Isn't that comparing apples and oranges?
They are comparing 2 different things. You are correct, but that's why we do the comparison to see how much more traffic the Dunkin' Donuts will generate, so we can quantify that for the township and for the residents.
And one last question, and maybe I don't quite understand it, but somebody mentioned something about local studies. I mean, could someone do a local study, like sit there someday, a whole group of, when I say a professional group, and see what the actuality is instead of doing just statistics and national averages, et cetera? Would that be possible to do a local study?
It's certainly possible, Ms. Collins, but again, we run into the situation where it's often debated what is the most representative site, which would be comparable to this location. And you need to look at the demographics, the proximity of the closest competing stores, The existing traffic volumes on Route 124. So to find a site that's going to match perfectly to what we're proposing here is very challenging. And to really take that out, to take out the subjectiveness of choosing your comparison site, it's a state standard, it's a national standard that we rely on these statistical predictions.
Okay, that's all for now. Thank you, Mr. Chase. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Any other members of the public with questions for this witness? Mr. Goldberg?
Yeah, hi, Lee Goldberg, 10 Arrowhead Road. Mr. Chase, thank you for your testimony and answering the questions from the board here this evening. Very valuable information. My question is, in terms of the gap analysis that's done, I want to phrase this in the form of a question. What happens if those gaps don't turn out to exist? I mean, I guess in theory, you can say they're bounded by signalized intersections on either side and the gaps will be there. But from pre-pandemic experience, having spent well over 100 times just creeping along there and seeing no gaps, literally from Normandy Parkway all the way up through Punch Bowl as cars creep northwest towards Morristown. There, many a time, if those gaps aren't there, what happens to the plan?
Sure, that's a good question. Really, that's why we do the gap study based on the existing prevailing conditions to see what those factors are. So, we take a look during peak conditions. So, we as traffic engineers, we focus on the peak hours. So we look at the morning and the evening peak commuter hours, and those represent the worst case scenario as you're mentioning. So, we really look at that, and you're correct in that you mentioned that it's bound by signals to the east and to the west. So regardless of the prevailing traffic conditions, there's going to be a point in time where traffic is held back on Madison Avenue and allows those gaps to create themselves and will allow those vehicles to process. So being that you're bound by signals on either side of the development in both the easterly and westerly direction, it's with certainty that those gaps will continue to be there in the future and allow those vehicles to process. And I think, Mr. Fishinger had a good suggestion, with the conversion of Old Turnpike Road, again, from a westbound to eastbound direction, that would further facilitate vehicles exiting the site, being able to utilize the signal at Con Road to make a signalized left turn movement should they not feel comfortable waiting for a gap in traffic at Langdon Lane.
Sure, yes. And then, so I guess my question for Mr. Fissinger or yourself is or Mr. Slate, maybe even, at what point does that get determined? I know that's not this applicant's problem or burden, but I agree, getting people to signalized intersections would, calm things and be the safer approach. So at what point in time does that determination get made? I know that might be outside of this process, but is that on the horizon to get to a point of determination on that? Making the street one way?
And I missed the beginning of that discussion. You're talking about Old Turnpike Road?
Correct, Mr. Slate. Yeah, is there still some possibility or determination that may be made going one way only towards Con Road, right, eastbound, I guess?
It would be eastbound, correct.
I would say it's unlikely. It'd be something up to the Township Committee to do a detailed study and really look at the traffic. Are there other bypasses that could occur as a result of that? Or now we're taking traffic and kind of putting it past residential properties where they don't go. So, it's really something, for the township to consider.
Thank you. And then my last question is, sort of co-located to this, the boundaries of the two preschool or learning academies on both sides is the to be built at some point recreational fields that is owned by the townships on the backside of the Honeywell track, which conceivably, as a rec complex with sports teams could conceivably add, I don't know, another 100 cars, give or take, on any given weekday. Was any traffic potential in the future incorporated into any of the studies that was coming into this sort of area of traffic?
There was not anything incorporated based on the potential redevelopment of those fields, no, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldberg. Any other questions from the public? Seeing none, now we can schedule the next meeting for public commentary and whatever else might transpire at that meeting. Amanda, do you want to?
Sure. So at this point, we would schedule the next hearing. And at that meeting, we would take comments from members of the public, and then Mr. Brady would provide a summation, and then the board would deliberate and vote.
So the next available meeting date?
May 2nd. Mr. Brady,
Yes.
will May 2nd work for you? Then your applicant.
I will look. Hold on. It would work for me. Mr. Patel?
Yeah, I'm fine with it, David.
Okay, and how about Mr. Simmons and Mr. Chase, just in case any questions come up and we need to deal with them?
I'm available on the 2nd. Paul maybe also.
Okay. Corey?
I'm not available on the 2nd, unfortunately, but I could arrange for another professional engineer from my office to cover if you feel like there may be the potential for questions.
Okay. Then, Mr. Chairman, we'll take the 2nd.
Okay, thank you.
So for members of the public, this meeting will be carried to May 2nd at 7 o'clock via Zoom, as far as I know. And at that point, you can make your comments, and we will give you ample time to do so because we do value your feedback.
And no need for noticing?
No need for further notice.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. So then we will continue this on May 2nd. May 2nd, all right, thank you. We still
Thank you,
have
Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome.
Good night.
See you then, thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Other matters, we have, Kathy, you're back on the agenda. Are you back on screen?
Back on.
Okay. Would you like to talk about the legislative agenda, or you talk about the survey, the Madison Avenue survey?
Yeah. Mark, do you want to say anything about legislation?
I prefer to defer to the next meeting, given that it's 10:20.
Okay. I have two comments. One is that I've requested time at our next meeting to share some information about Sustainable Jersey. So just confirming that, Mr. Chairman, right? About 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah, I'd like to include, maybe we can talk about that. Maybe we can talk about that now and talk about Sustainable New Jersey and master planning.
I don't have I was gonna send a few documents to the board. I haven't done that yet.
So, do you think we can put aside
Something with the microphone.
Kathy, I don't know if it's something to do on your end. Do you have a second device on or something? Because ever since you turned your mic back on, we're getting feedback.
No. I don't.
Sounds like it's only when I'm talking.
Seems like it stopped.
Yeah, it does sound that way. Well, I think that's a good idea, Kathy, because I'd like to set aside some time to talk about master planning issues as well as Sustainable New Jersey. I think they go together. Do a little training.
We'll have some a report about some local resolutions, some of which are directly connected with Sustainable Jersey, some are not. So maybe if we could have, I'm thinking my portion 10 to 15 minutes. I'm not sure how much additional time would be needed for what you're talking about, Ed. I don't know.
I'm thinking at least an hour that would cover the items. Can we include that?
Ed, can I jump in on the, if you want to discuss the master plan? I know Jim is aware of this, but I'm on vacation on May 2nd. So if you want me to participate in that, which I assume you would, we'd have to defer to the master plan to a different date.
So we can do one Sustainable New Jersey, the second, and then.
Yes,
Yeah,
assuming- Do we have any other?
we'll catch you up later, Paul.
yeah.
Do we have any other applications on the second or just this one?
Just that one,
I'm sorry?
just one.
So I don't imagine that would take us the full night, so we can do Sustainable New Jersey. And then, can we set up a time at a future meeting, to talk about the master plan?
The following meeting is at the 16th, May 16th meeting is a restoration. Hardware is coming in with an amended site plan, so I would not recommend the master plan discussion for that meeting. I think it would have to be carried to something in June.
Right, okay.
Okay. So that we'll do that. And I just wanted to highlight for the board, I hope everyone has seen the messengers that have come out highlighting what our Economic Development Advisory Committee is doing. They're proceeding with their visioning study of Madison Avenue corridor. And they're at the stage now of obtaining input from the public. And so a survey went out a few days ago, and they're doing a public visioning session on April 28th. And there was a messenger email that went out about that as well. So I just wanted to highlight that for everyone. And I hope everyone will take the survey and join. This is preliminary information gathering, and we'll see what happens, what comes of it, and make decisions from there about what additional outreach they may do. So just a quick update on that.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, this is Linda. You said a messenger went out with that information. I didn't see that unless I missed it.
Yes, a messenger went out about, I believe, one about the survey and a separate one about the virtual event on the 28th.
Are we using the entire municipal messenger distribution list, which I'm on, but
wow. Yes, as far as I know.
Just as an FYI, I don't recall seeing that. So if you want to maybe recheck with them and see what list they used.
Yes, I don't know. There are some wrinkles that occur here and there with individuals. Somebody, it went to their junk. I don't know if you know, it happened to me once. It doesn't usually do that, but one time it did. I don't know why. So, but I'll check on, and as far as I know, it went to everyone on the messenger.
Okay.
Yeah, I got it on April 12th. 5:20.
I'll go back and look again, but because I was away on vacation, but I don't remember seeing it.
Well, and it's going to be sent out, I believe, once a week. The survey is going to be once a week for, I believe, 5 weeks. It might be 6. I'm not positive on that, but if you missed it once, you will be getting it again.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Great, and just a reminder about the annual financial statement requirement for completion by April 30th. Everyone,
The what?
the annual financial disclosure forms
Oh, yes.
for the state of New
Thank
Jersey.
you.
We all need to complete those forms by April 30th.
Mhm.
Any other members? Anyone make any more comments? If not, we'll open up the table to members of the public who would like to make comments unrelated to this evening's application.
Not related to this.
Unrelated, yeah.
Unrelated.
Any members of the public have any comments they'd like to make? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to adjourn.
Chief none. Second,
I'll second. We missed Joe Alesso.
All in favor? Aye. We're also happy to be here. All in favor? Adjourn?
Aye.
Aye.
See you on May 2nd.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
Good night.
Good. Night.